Chapter 1166. No matter which world one was in, the sky was indispensable. In this world, there was also a clear sky. At a certain moment, in the thick clouds, an arc made of bright gold and emerald gems flew out, leaving behind two long tails and two dazzling jets of light. Like a fighter jet, it streaked across the sky with a sharp sound of breaking through the air. That was naturally the Vimana. On the deck of the Vimana, Yair Beatty curiously observed his surroundings while looking at the sky that was receding at an extremely fast speed. He clicked his tongue in wonder, then turned his gaze to Noah, who was sitting on the throne in boredom. His cheeks suddenly became flushed and intoxicated. As expected of the supreme ruler of the great underground tomb of Nasarek. Only such a tool that can allow one to fly in the sky can match your might. In Yggdrasil, it was not that there were no magic spells that could allow people to fly. However, there were no means of transportation or magical tools that could carry people in flight. What's more, the Vimana's appearance was indeed quite good. Not only was its entire body made of gold, even its wings were made of gems. Together with the throne, there was no other tool more suitable to be used as a transportation tool for people with extremely high status. After all, the noble artifact named Vimana was a flying device that even the proud and arrogant hero king used as a vehicle, so it was naturally of a high standard. Of course, Noah did not use the Vimana to show off, but to use it as a transportation tool. Seeing Yair Beatty looking at him with an infatuated and intoxicated expression, and with a flushed face, Noah really did not know what to say. Although it was a good thing to be infatuated with such a peerless beauty, Noah could not feel happy at all. There was no other reason other than Yair Beatty's infatuation was too sudden. Noah had only come to this world yesterday, and it was also yesterday that he met Yair Beatty. But from the first time they met, Yair Beatty had this attitude. How should he put it? On the bright side, it could be said that Noah had experienced the feeling of being loved at first sight. But on the downside, wouldn't he feel that this was too sudden and unacceptable? Of course, as mentioned earlier, it was a good thing to have a peerless beauty so infatuated with him, no matter how sudden it was. However, Yair Beatty's infatuation always made Noah think of someone. Freya. She was known as the goddess of love and goddess of beauty. She also possessed a peerless beauty that no one else could reach. She was the peerlessly beautiful goddess who had expressed her admiration for Noah without any scruples when they first met. When Noah looked at Yair Beatty, it was as if he was looking at the shadow of that beautiful goddess. He couldn't help but feel awkward. It must be known that Noah did not have a good impression of her. It was Freya Beatty's gaze. Freya. Fortunately, although Yair Beatty's gaze towards Noah was no less infatuated and passionate than Freya's, it did not have Freya's extremely blatant possessiveness. Otherwise, Noah would really have to keep a respectful distance from Yair Beatty. However, he would still feel awkward. At that moment, Noah could only helplessly call out, Yair Beatty. Yes. Yair Beatty immediately responded in high spirits. What are you doing? Noah asked somewhat dispiritedly. Do you even need to ask? Yair Beatty put on a praying posture, but his face was flushed as he stared at Noah with an intoxicated look. Of course I'm admiring the Supreme Lord Noah's figure. If you want to look at me, you can look at me anytime, right? Noah could not help but cover his face. Is it necessary to keep staring at me like this? Of course it's necessary. Yair Beatty said this without hesitation. If I miss seeing the Supreme Lord for even a second, my heart will feel as if it's splitting apart. If it's 10 seconds. No, more than 5 seconds, then I'll definitely die of sadness. Is that so? The corners of Noah's mouth twitched. But our mission this time is to look for signs of human habitation, not to look at me. If you keep staring at me like this, how are you going to find any traces of human habitation? That's true. Yair Beatty seemed to have just remembered the main mission, and looked extremely regretful and reluctant to part with it. Although I really want to continue admiring Lord Noah's figure, if I don't complete the mission given by Lord Noah, then I'm not qualified to be called a virtuous wife. Virtuous wife? Noah smiled embarrassedly and muttered. Shouldn't I be an assistant or something like that? No. Yair Beatty said in a resolute tone, as if this was the correct way to go. I'm a virtuous wife. Yair Beatty's resolute manner made Noah feel that this was the correct way to put it, and he suddenly felt extremely shocked. Could it be that this is some kind of skill or magic that affects one's mind and will? Does it have to be so dangerous? At this moment, Noah suddenly caught a glimpse of a forest below. To be more precise, he caught a glimpse of a village in the middle of the forest. It was a village with wheat fields all around it, and it was filled with the atmosphere of the countryside. It wasn't very civilized, but it gave off an aura of life. When he saw the village, Noah's eyes lit up, and he stood up. Yair Beatty, is that a village? Yair Beatty was stunned at first, but when he saw the village in the middle of the forest, he immediately smiled. Yes, Lord Noah, we found the village. Noah suddenly smiled. However, immediately after, the smile on Noah's face froze, and he frowned. This was because the situation in the village in front of him was somewhat inexplicable. From Noah's angle, he could clearly see that there were ant-like black dots running out of the houses, and they seemed to be in a panic. Other than these black dots that seemed to be in a panic, there were also black dots that were moving at an extremely fast speed from all directions of the village, constantly chasing after those black dots that were in a panic. What's going on? Noah felt that something was strange, and he controlled Vimana to lower its altitude. Not long after, Noah's pair of pitch-black and deep eyes began to reveal a terrifying expression. He saw that the black dots that were running out of the houses were villagers wearing crude clothing. As for the black dots that were chasing after these villagers, they were all wearing heavy full-body armor, holding sharp knight swords in their hands. They were mounted on horses, and they were constantly swinging their blades at the villagers. Every time a knight swung his sword, a villager would fall. The villagers had no strength to resist, and could only desperately run away. Under this inhumane massacre, the entire village seemed to have turned into a purgatory. An atmosphere of terror and panic filled the air, and there was even a hint of despair. Looking at the appearance of those fully armed knights, they shouldn't be bandits or robbers, but soldiers from somewhere, right? Soldiers slaughtering ordinary villagers? Humph, Noah coldly snorted. Yair Beatty, let's go down. Yair Beatty was startled, but soon after, as if he had thought of something, he asked doubtfully. Could it be that Sir Noah wants to save those inferior creatures? Lower-class creature? Noah looked at Yair Beatty. Don't forget, I'm also one of those inferior creatures you speak of. How could that be? Yair Beatty hurriedly said. Sir Noah is different from those humans. Just like the undying aliens, some are only low-level, while some are high-level. Naturally, Sir Noah is not one of those useless inferior creatures. Indeed, among humans, there are some existences that are not worthy of pity even if they die. Noah glanced at Yair Beatty. However, before I see it with my own eyes, I will not categorize everyone as hopeless. Whether or not they are useful, I will use my own eyes to judge. After saying that, Noah noticed something. In a corner of the village, a pair of sisters broke through the encirclement and escaped into the forest. However, behind the sisters, there were two knights chasing after them. Seeing this, Noah no longer hesitated. Thus, the Vimana floating in the air suddenly trembled, and like a sharp arrow, it flew in the direction of the forest. Chapter 1167. Ha. Ha. Ha, her breathing became more and more hurried. Thump. Thump. Thump, her heartbeat that only she could hear. Ah. Screams of agony came from her hometown that was getting further and further away. Stop right there. Don't even think about running away. The knights with a ruthless aura roared as if they were urging death to come closer. Every roar seemed to be telling the young girl, Enli, a fact. Even though her legs were trembling from running, her stamina was getting exhausted. Not long after, as a normal village girl, she could only welcome the hell that had slowed down a little. If Enli was alone, perhaps she would have already broken down and given up on running away. she would have accepted her fate and accepted her death in despair. However, the slender hand that Enli held tightly in her hand became Enli's motivation to not give up. That hand belonged to Enli's little sister, who was only 10 years old. It was this little sister who was 6 years younger than Enli that made Enli unable to give up easily. Ha! 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 Her breathing became more and more hurried. Sweat had already soaked Enli's clothes on her back. Even Enli was in such a state, let alone her little sister who was only 10 years old. Ah! At a certain moment, the little sister suddenly staggered and let out a sorrowful cry, almost falling to the ground. Fortunately, due to her young age, her little sister was very light. Enli, who had to farm every day, could easily pull her up and not lose her balance. However, this situation would undoubtedly make Enli anxious. Nim! Hurry! Let's keep running. N. The little girl called Nim nodded repeatedly as if she was about to cry. However, at the next moment, the voice that represented death rang in Enli and Nim's ears in exasperation. Run? Where can you run to? The voice made Enli and Nim's body stiffen instantly as they looked behind in fear. Over there, the two knights who were holding their blood-stained swords, and their armor and helmets were also stained with blood. They were angry because of the unnecessary pursuit and had already arrived behind the sisters. Damn it! One of the knights mercilessly raised his knight's sword towards Enli and Nim, who had stopped moving, and spat out some words of fury. How dare I waste my time on such a little girl? Looking at the blood-stained sword that was raised up high towards her, Enli's mind had already turned blank. She could only tightly hug her terrified little sister and close her eyes. In the next moment, the blood-stained sword that was raised high fell directly. Just as Enli and Nim were waiting for their impending death and pain, a faint sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from afar, darting between a pair of knights and a pair of sisters. Clang! The sound of steel colliding with steel echoed in the air and entered Nim's and Enli's ears. Enli and Nim opened their eyes in horror when they didn't feel the excruciating pain they had imagined. He saw a figure. A figure with his back facing Enli, and Nim was facing the knight who was swinging his sword. The two knights suddenly stiffened. Because even if the knight's sword couldn't cut through steel like mud, it could still easily cut through flesh and bones, but it was blocked by a single hand. That hand didn't wear any armor. That hand didn't cast any magic. However, it was such a hand that the knight's sword couldn't even leave a scratch on its skin. In a crisp clashing sound, the sword was blocked by the hand. Bang! There were no premonitions. Just as the two knights were stunned by the unrealistic scene in front of them, following a heavy muffled sound, the knight whose sword couldn't cut through the skin on the bare arm was sent flying and smashed into a nearby tree. The force was so great that the tree that was smashed directly broke and slowly fell down. As for the fully armed and heavily armored knight, he slid down the broken tree trunk and fell to the ground. His head tilted to one side and he stopped breathing. Upon closer inspection, a huge dent was imprinted on the chest of the knight's armor. With such a powerful force, it was impossible for the knight to survive even if he wanted to. Looking at this scene, the other knight was completely stunned on the spot and lost his ability to react. Enli and the Nim sisters were also stunned and couldn't move. Until a somewhat displeased voice sounded. It seems that after the ability value update, I can't control the increase in physical strength. Opening and closing his clenched fist slowly, Noah lifted his head and looked at the remaining knight who was staring at him blankly. Then, he said faintly, "Don't worry about me. Forget it, a guy who can even kill innocent women and children without mercy, presumably, there's no need to be merciful." This sentence finally awakened the remaining knight. "You." The knight took a step back and roared fiercely. "Who are you?" Hearing this, before Noah had time to speak, a sharp voice that seemed to be able to tear through the air sounded. "Just a lowly creature. Who allowed you to speak to Sir Noah in that tone?" The moment the words fell, a flash of light slashed across the knight's neck. Poochie! Accompanied by a crisp tearing sound, the knight's neck spurted out a large amount of blood. After a moment of stiffness, he fell to the ground. As for the part above the knight's neck, it was thrown high into the air and fell in front of Anli and Nim. After spinning a few times, it stopped. Ah! Anli and Nim finally let out a cry of grief. Amidst Anli and Nim's cries, a fully armored figure walked out from the side of the forest. It was a figure wearing a pitch-black color that covered its owner's entire body, not revealing a single bit of skin. Its appearance looked like a demon, and even its palm was covered by a metal glove with sharp claws. It didn't give off a heavy feeling, instead, it gave off a slender feeling. At a glance, one could tell that it was a female's armor. "I'm very sorry, Sir Noah." Yearbade's pleasant voice came from under the full helmet with sharp horns. "Although it's just a group of lowly creatures, but just in case, I still feel that it's better to put on the armor, so I spent some time preparing." Originally, this kind of insect shouldn't be dealt with by Sir Noah himself. "No, your consideration is not wrong, there's no need to apologize." Noah shook his head, then looked at Anli and Nim, and said, "Are you okay?" Anli seemed to have realized that she was saved, and raised her pretty face that was extremely pale due to the overly bloody scene. I'm fine, is that so?" Noah nodded, then turned around. "Then you guys stay here. Before this matter is over, find a place to hide so that you won't be targeted again." After saying this, Noah was about to walk towards the direction of the village when Anli's emotional voice came. Thank you very much for saving my life. Please save my parents. My parents are still in the village." "Still in the village?" Noah's footsteps paused, and glanced at the pale but emotional Anli. "I will save everyone in your village. If your parents are still alive, then they will naturally be fine." After saying this, Noah didn't stay any longer, and directly walked towards the direction of the village. "Thank you." Anli's pretty face that was crying tears of joy from surviving a disaster immediately lowered. "Thank you." Under the gaze of Anli and Nim, Noah brought Yearbade and left the forest. When Noah and Yearbade arrived at the village, the massacre was still ongoing. Fully armed knights were either on horseback or running, with ruthless laughter, as if they were enjoying the desperation of the fleeing villagers. They constantly swung the swords in their hands, bringing forth bursts of crimson blood. Looking at this scene, Noah's heart gradually turned cold, and he slowly walked forward. Wang! A burst of shocking magic suddenly rose from Noah's body. Chapter 1168. When an astonishing amount of magic power gushed out of the space like a tidal wave and spread in all directions, whether it was the knights who were enjoying the slaughter or the villagers who were fleeing for their lives, they could clearly hear a trembling sound. Amidst the clear tremors, the storm surged from Noah's body like a storm, turning into a substantial shockwave that shook the surrounding mana. With a bone-chilling chill, it shrouded the hearts of everyone present. As a result, the knights who were laughing recklessly all trembled in their hearts, their faces stiffened, and they all stopped what they were doing, turned their heads in horror, and looked towards the direction of the forest. There, Noah seemed to be shrouded in a light beam that set off a frenzied airflow, step by step, walking towards the direction of the village. In the next second, a cold voice reverberated, and very clearly drilled into the ears of everyone present. "Do you feel so happy attacking the villagers who have no power to resist?" That cold voice directly pierced into the hearts of every knight present, awakening the most fundamental emotion in their hearts. That emotion was called fear. If enjoying other people's grief, despair, and death is such a joyful thing, then please let me experience it a little bit. Saying such a sentence, Noah slowly raised his head. "Although, I have no interest in it." The moment the words fell, Noah slowly raised his face, a pair of dark and deep eyes suddenly flashed with a cold silver-white luster, dyeing Noah's pair of eyes into a completely silver-white color. The knights who were stared at by that pair of ice-cold silver-white eyes only felt a shadow of death burst out from their hearts, causing their faces to become deathly pale in an instant. At some point, such a voice rang out. "Quick! Run!" This sentence directly ignited the whole atmosphere that had become cold and piercing to the bones. But, it was already too late to escape at this time. Crack crack, such an extremely abrupt sound suddenly appeared in the space. It was like the sound of thick ice gradually condensing. In such a condensed sound, the knights were horrified to find that they couldn't move. Because, the feet that the knights used to move were constantly turning into heavy steel at a speed visible to the naked eye, gradually spreading to the bodies of the knights. No. 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 Spare us. The knights who collapsed first only had time to let out such a scream, and then, their entire heads turned into heavy steel, and their bodies directly turned into statues, no longer making a sound. Help. Help. No. God. God. Please save us. The knights who were further away also gradually turned into cold steel as they shouted towards the sky with teary faces. In less than 3 seconds, Zhang Xian was stunned. In the open space of the village, the knights who were still enjoying the wails and screams of others 3 seconds ago, turned into steel statues in the end, listening to their own screams and screams. The faces of the statues made of cold steel still vividly showed the fear and despair that these knights involuntarily revealed a second ago. That scene was enough to make any timid person unable to sleep in the middle of the night after seeing it. Then, the knights who were lucky enough not to be turned into steel by Noah's cold smelting were only the 4 or 5 knights who were the furthest away and not in Noah's sight. However, those 4 or 5 knights were obviously scared out of their wits by the scene in front of them. Their companions who were enjoying the pleasure of chasing their prey with them a few seconds ago, at this moment, directly turned into cold steel statues with fear and despair. The fear in the hearts of these knights was imaginable. Escape. This was the first thought in the hearts of the 4 or 5 knights who survived. However, undoubtedly, there was a strong urge to escape, but the feet of those 4 or 5 knights were trembling all the time, and they couldn't move at all. There was no other way. Because, no one knew whether they would slowly turn into cold steel like their companions the moment they turned around. No. It should be said that these knights were very clear about it. The moment they ran away, their own death would immediately come. This was the real reason why these knights felt despair and fear. Under such circumstances, Noah, whose eyes were still flashing with cold silver light, turned his head and looked at the 4 or 5 knights. The fear that accumulated in the hearts of these 4 or 5 knights finally burst out in one breath. A man who was obviously the captain of these knights let out a sharp cry of fear. You guys go. Charge. Stop that man. Don't let him come near me. This sentence clearly showed the selfish side of this knight captain. I'm not someone who can casually die here. Stop him for me. Stop him. Under the hysterical screams of the knight captain, the rest of the knights couldn't even move. They could only cry for their mothers and fathers. God. Why don't you save us? Undoubtedly, we are so pious. Why? God. The knights' cries for their parents made Noah's cold silver eyes show some disgust. Pious? That's right, these knights should be considered pious, right? In the last moments of their lives, they were still praying to God. If they weren't desperate, then they really wanted to be saved by God. But it was also because of this that these knights didn't feel any guilt when they attacked ordinary villagers who didn't have the ability to resist. After all, they all believed that they, who believed in God, would be forgiven in the end no matter how abominable their crimes were. With such a twisted belief, the knights brandished their swords without any guilt. It was simply disgusting. With such feelings, Noah's pair of eyes gradually returned to their original pitch-black depth, and the vibrating magic on his body also gradually retracted. He turned around and no longer looked at those disgusting knights. Yair bade, deal with them. These words made Yair bade, who had been standing beside Noah, raise his head. In the gap between the eyes of his heavy helmet, a scarlet light flashed, as if representing joy. Yes, sir. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge axe suddenly appeared in Yair bade's hand. He bent his body, and like a bullet, he shot out violently, rushing towards the screaming knights with an evil aura. A flash of light suddenly appeared in the air, Poochie. 4 or 5 heads suddenly flew into the air, splashing a large amount of blood along the way. The battle ended in an instant. Afterward, Noah found out that this village was called Khan Village, and it was located in the forest 10 kilometers away from the underground tomb of Nassarik. In the center of Khan Village, there was a square. At this time, a group of villagers who were lucky enough to survive all knelt on the ground, bowing their heads in gratitude towards Noah. Fei. Thank you very much for saving us. The leader was naturally the village chief of Khan Village. He was a middle-aged villager who was at least 40 years old. Kneeling on the ground, the village chief even pressed his head against the dirty ground and said in a sincere voice, "If it wasn't for you, sir, none of us would have survived. I'm really grateful." Behind the village chief, a group of villagers who survived the disaster also more or less expressed their gratitude towards Noah with joy and sorrow. Joy was naturally for the result of their survival. Sorrow was for the family members who did not manage to escape the night's massacre and died. Among them were Onli and Nim. The pair of sisters were lying on top of their parents' corpses, crying bitterly. Noah was unable to save Onli and Nim's parents. It was not because Noah could not save them. It was because before Noah arrived, in order to buy time for the sisters to escape, Onli and Nim's parents fought with their lives and stopped the knights. Otherwise, with just Onli and Nim, how could they successfully escape into the forest? Looking at Onli and Nim who were crying loudly, Noah sighed. Forget it. Let's be a good person until the end. Chapter 1169. Under the watchful eyes of the villagers, Noah separated the crowd and brought Yair bait to Onli and Nim, who were crying over their parents' corpses. Woo! Woo woo woo! Although Onli and Nim noticed Noah's arrival, the grief in their hearts could not stop their tears. They could only look at Noah, bite their lips, and hold back their cries. Under such circumstances, Noah looked down at Onli condescendingly and uttered such words. Do you want to resurrect your parents? That one sentence made the entire space that was filled with cries suddenly become deathly silent. Onli's crying also stopped abruptly. With a beautiful face full of tears, she looked up and stared blankly at Noah, murmuring. Resurrect? That's right, resurrect. Noah said faintly. I have a way to resurrect your parents. After saying that, Noah raised a hand. Wang. In the midst of the trembling sound, golden ripples undulated from above Noah's hand, and a short staff fell into Noah's palm. It was about 30 centimeters long, the color of ivory, and the front part was decorated with gold. The staff was engraved with strange runes, and it was filled with a holy aura. It was the resurrection staff. Lord Noah. Seeing this scene, the fully armed Yair bait let out a surprised and puzzled voice. Don't tell me, you want to use precious magical tools for these low, ordinary villagers? From Yair bait's voice, Noah could hear a strong sense of confusion and doubt. However, that was understandable. In the game Yggdrasil, the most important tools were scrolls, short staffs, magic sealing crystals, and so on. This was because these tools were magical tools, and they could be used to activate the magic that the tool itself carried. Among them, scrolls and magic sealing crystals were one-time consumables that could be thrown away after use. On the other hand, short staffs and magic staffs were tools that could be used to cast spells that were equivalent to the number of times they were stored. That is to say, if there was a short staff or magic staff that stored up 10 times of casting magic, then when the user used this tool to cast magic 10 times and used up all of the stored magic, this short staff or magic staff would disappear. Therefore, although magic tools such as short staffs and magic staffs were also consumables, compared to single-use scrolls and magic sealing crystals, their value would vary according to the number of spells stored. Of course, there were also factors such as the type and level of the spell. I have to mention it here. In Yggdrasil, there were a total of 11 levels of magic. Of course, even if it was a one-time use magic item, if the magic carried within it was not only a type of magic item that could display extremely precious effects, but also a high-level magic item, then it would definitely be more precious than a low-level magic item such as a short staff or a magic staff. Although the resurrection spell and the Staff of Resurrection was only a low-level resurrection spell, the resurrection effect was already quite precious. Furthermore, it was a short staff-type magic tool. If one were to say that it was precious, then it was indeed precious. Especially now that this was no longer a game, there was no way to obtain these items from Yggdrasil. Only the items that Noah obtained in the treasure hall were left. Once they were used up, there would be nothing left. After all, although Noah's Gate of Babylon could automatically replenish consumable items, it could only replenish those items that were in the treasure vault from the beginning. For example, Noah obtained items from the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasarek and stored them in the Gate of Babylon from other places. Items that were not in the Gate of Babylon from the beginning could not be automatically replenished. In this way, the rarer an item was, the more valuable it was. Since it was a consumable item, and its effect was to resurrect the dead, it naturally made the value of the Staff of Resurrection extremely precious. In Yair-Bade's mind, humans were just a group of worthless inferior creatures. Using a precious resurrection item to resurrect some ordinary villagers was really unwise. Of course, this so-called wisdom was based on rationality. And rational judgment was never a reason for Noah to give up. Yair-Bade, Noah said as he played with the staff of holy light in his hand, as if he was talking to himself. If, one day, I died in front of you, how would you feel? That's impossible. Yair-Bade said without hesitation. As a supreme sovereign, even if I have to cut my body into pieces, I will not let your life be threatened in the slightest. That's why I said if, Noah said with a wry smile. If I died in front of you, how would you feel? Yair-Bade lowered his head. After a while, his whole body started to tremble, as if he couldn't imagine such a scene, and he started to sob. I don't want Lord Noah to die. I'm the same. Noah sighed and looked at Enli, who was staring blankly at him. No matter who you are, there are people who are extremely important to you. Regardless of race or other viewpoints, Yair-Bade, if I were to die in front of you one day, and a lowly human in your eyes had a way to revive me, wouldn't you have the extravagant hope that this person could revive me? Lord Noah. Yair-Bade was at a loss for words. I know that you're not a bad person. You're just too stubborn in your point of view and mentality, Noah said as he patted Yair-Bade's shoulder. So, let's put ourselves in your shoes. Wasting a resurrection item in exchange for peace of mind is not a bad idea, right? As expected of the benevolent and merciful Honorable Supreme. Yair-Bade's voice returned to normal, and he lowered his body in the most respectful and reverent manner. If this is the Supreme's decision, Yair-Bade will naturally not have any objections. Hearing this, Noah smiled and looked at Enli. How about it? Do you want to resurrect your parents? Only then did Enli react, and she became excited. Can you do such a thing? If you're asking whether or not I can do it, then my answer is yes, Noah said without any change in his expression. So, what's your choice? Please resurrect my parents. Enli moved her knees and knelt in front of Noah, kowtowing repeatedly. I beg you, please resurrect my parents. At this moment, the surrounding villagers also reacted, and they all kowtowed one after another. Please resurrect our family. We also beg you. No matter what price we have to pay. We're all willing. I beg you, please. All right, stop kowtowing. Noah laughed bitterly. Gather all the dead people together, and then move aside. Without any hesitation, everyone moved, and gathered the dead people in front of Noah, and then retreated to the side with a hopeful and uneasy expression. Noah nodded, and raised the short staff in his hand. Clang! Suddenly, the jewel inlaid on the tip of the short staff emitted a dazzling light, and it emitted the most concentrated holy aura, which filled the entire area. All the villagers present blocked their eyes with their hands to block the dazzling light, but their eyes were fixed on the corpses, and their eyes and faces were full of nervousness. Under such circumstances, the holy aura that filled the entire area covered the corpses, causing them to emit a faint, soft light. In the next second, everyone saw it. On the corpses that were emitting a faint, soft light, the fatal wounds disappeared one by one. When the light dissipated, the short staff that was emitting a dazzling light also calmed down. Bang! The short staff, which had calmed down, directly shattered into pieces. And the corpses, one by one, moved their fingers slightly, and slowly opened their eyes. The villagers' faces flushed red. Then, shocking cheers resounded throughout the entire village. Chapter 1170. Thank you. Thank you so much. In one of the houses in Khan village, the village chief bowed his head and thanked Noah, who was sitting opposite him. His tone and expression were full of gratitude and respect. Thank you for saving our entire village. Lord Noah. Noah sighed as he looked at the village chief, who bowed his head and thanked him. All right, if you want to thank me, you've already thanked me so many times. It's time to stop, right? But. The village chief glanced at the fully armed Yair Bade and said with shame. You seem to have wasted an extremely precious magical tool in order to save the villagers. We really don't know how to repay you. We can only offer you the highest level of gratitude. That was the truth. Although the village chief was truly grateful, at the same time, he was also worried that he wouldn't be able to compensate Noah for wasting an important resurrection tool. Needless to say, Khan village was relatively poor. It was so poor that the village didn't even have a real weapon. The only thing they had were hoes and other items that had an extraordinary relationship with crops. Under such circumstances, not to mention a precious resurrection tool, even the lowest level magical tool was too extravagant for the Khan village to be equipped with it. So, how could the poor Khan village repay Noah? Of course, they could only thank him with all their might, right? After understanding this, Noah spoke helplessly. Village chief, you don't have to worry about this. Although it is a rare resurrection tool, it isn't as precious as you think. Besides, I have more than one. This sentence was half true and half false. Perhaps, in the game called Yggdrasil, magical tools that only had the effect of low-level resurrection spells weren't very precious. But now, in reality, even a magical tool with the effect of low-level resurrection spells was relatively precious. However, just like what Noah said, he did obtain a lot of magical tools with the effect of low-level resurrection spells in the underground tomb of Nasarek. After all, the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasarek was the result of the hard work of the entire Ains ul Gong. In Yggdrasil, the guild called Ains ul Gong was one of the strongest guilds at its peak. The treasures that such a guild had accumulated over the years were unimaginable. Just look at the piles of gold and silver treasures and items in the treasure hall. In addition, there were only a total of 200 world-level tools in the entire game, and the guild called Ains ul Gong had more than a dozen of them. One could imagine how many treasures of other levels they had accumulated. Aside from the gold and silver treasures that only had monetary value, almost 70% of the treasures in the treasure hall had been taken by Noah. There were indeed many magical tools with the effect of low-level resurrection spells in the treasure hall. After all, in Yggdrasil, magical tools with the effect of low-level resurrection spells weren't very precious. They could only resurrect low-level characters. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a collector in Ains ul Gong, these magical tools might not have appeared in the treasure hall. The only resurrection item that could truly catch the eye of Ains ul Gong was probably the highest grade resurrection item that could allow one to resurrect without any conditions, costs, and losses. Noah also had a similar type of precious resurrection tools. Compared to those, the resurrection short staff that only had the effect of low-level resurrection spells wasn't considered precious. In exchange for a peace of mind, Noah felt that it was worth it. If you really want to thank me, then please fulfill my request. Noah said to the village chief. We actually came from a faraway place, and we are not familiar with the situation in this area. So, if you can tell us some information about this place, we will be very grateful. Of course, no problem. The village chief quickly replied. No matter what you want to know, as long as I know, I will definitely tell you. Noah nodded and began to ask questions. As time passed, Noah gradually began to understand what kind of world he was in. Simply put, this was a world that was somewhat similar to but different from the looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon world. The similarity was that in this world, there weren't only humans, but also other races. For example, in this world, there were races that were classified as humans such as dwarves and elves. For example, in this world, there were also races that were classified as subhumans such as goblins, orcs, and ogres. What surprised Noah was that in this world, there were even races like the mutants in the underground tomb of Nasarek. For example, vampires, slimes, zombies, and so on. It was like a world with a hodgepodge of races. The difference was that in this world, the relationship between the races could only be described as bad. Humans would treat the goblins, orcs, and ogres as magical creatures. Demons would also treat humans as targets to hunt. As for the xenomorph species, they treated both of them as targets to be slaughtered, vividly displaying the saying, "Those who are not of my race must have a different heart." The status of humans in this world was quite low, and their forces were also the weakest. Humans were not like those subhumans, who were born with physical advantages. Other races also had more or less innate advantages. If there was any advantage that humans had, it was probably that they were quite developed in the degree of wisdom. Therefore, in this world, the status of humans was not high, and their forces were not wide. They were a very weak race. According to the village chief, he only knew information about 3 human countries. The first one was the Restige Kingdom. Khan Village and the underground tomb of Nasarek were all within the borders of this kingdom. The second one was the Baha's Empire. It was a country that was always at war with the Restige Kingdom. The remaining country had extraordinary faith in the so-called God, and advocated the supremacy of humans, and advocated the elimination of all races except for humans. It was called the Celian Theocracy. The Restige Kingdom. The Baha's Empire. The Celian Theocracy. 3 countries was the limit of the human countries that the village chief knew. As for the other countries and the countries of other races, as the village chief of a rural village, the village chief did not know much. After understanding this, Noah nodded. In other words, we are now within the borders of the kingdom? Yes. The village chief first answered respectfully, then he clenched his teeth and said with some resentment. And those knights who slaughtered the villagers in our village, the armor they wore had the emblem of the kingdom, so they should be soldiers of the kingdom. Noah smiled at the village chief's words but didn't say anything. Noah did not think that those knights were soldiers of the kingdom. There was no other reason. Before those knights died, they all expressed their faith in God. As for the country that had faith in God, the village chief had just said that it was the Celian Theocracy. Armor and emblem could be faked. The faith that prayed for God's protection before death could not be faked. Therefore, those knights were not soldiers of the kingdom, but people of the theocracy. As for why they would disguise themselves as people of the kingdom and slaughter the people in the kingdom, it was most likely for political reasons. Did my unintentional interference interfere with the power struggle between countries? Noah tapped his fingers on the table rhythmically and narrowed his eyes. It seems that this matter is far from over. At this moment, a villager rushed in a flustered manner and said loudly, "Village chief. Not good. There seems to be a large group of soldiers on horseback approaching the village." "What?" The village chief cried out in shock. They had just been massacred by a country's soldiers, and now there was another group of soldiers? The village chief and the villagers were in a mess. Noah was the only one who pursed his lips as expected. As expected, it won't end so easily. Chapter 1171. When Noah brought Yair bed out of the village head's house and arrived at the Khan village's square, most of the villagers had already gathered there. Moreover, they all had panicked looks on their faces, causing the scene to appear somewhat chaotic. When Noah and Yair bed appeared in the square, the villagers of Khan village were overjoyed and looked at Noah for help. The poor group of ordinary villagers who had been living a poor but peaceful life suddenly suffered a devastating blow. If it weren't for Noah's help, the entire Khan village would have been slaughtered. Now, they finally heaved a sigh of relief after surviving the disaster, only to discover that a large number of soldiers were approaching Khan village. It was already quite amazing that they were only flustered and didn't panic. Of course, the reason why the villagers didn't panic was also because Noah was still in Khan village. To these extremely ordinary and poor villagers, Noah, who could get rid of so many knights in the blink of an eye and resurrect the dead, was no different from a god. Therefore, the villagers here believed that as long as Noah was willing to help, Khan village would definitely be able to survive again. Noah shook his head and said after taking in the villagers' pleading gazes, "Don't worry, I'm not going to let you go. We can't be sure if the other party is planning to harm Khan village, so you don't have to be so worried." After saying that, Noah looked at the village chief. "Dismiss everyone here and find a place to hide first. I'll stay with you and see what kind of people they are." After hearing Noah's words, the village chief and the villagers were slightly relieved. Then, without the need for the village chief's instructions, the villagers scattered one by one and hid in their houses. They shut their doors and windows tightly and gave the vast square to Noah, Yair-bed, and the village chief. Noah, Yair-bed, and the village chief stood side by side in the square and looked into the distance with different expressions. Noah's expression didn't change at all. He was still as calm as ever. Yair-bed's expression couldn't be seen because he was fully armed. However, he held the giant axe tightly in his hand and was ready to protect Noah under any circumstances. The village chief was the only one who looked uneasy. However, no matter how uneasy he was, time still passed by bit. Not long after, the chaotic sound of horse hooves stomping on the ground in front of them caused a cloud of dust to slowly spread out, causing a group of people to appear before everyone's eyes. They were all mounted on horses, but their equipment was not uniform. They were all equipped with different equipment. Some were wearing leather armor, while others were wearing chain mail. They looked like field troops, and there were about 20 to 30 of them. The group of cavalrymen riding on horses stirred up dust and sand. They carried a murderous aura as they entered Khan village and arrived at the square. Nay! Under the gazes of Noah, Yair-bed, and the village chief, the cavalrymen, who looked like a field army, stopped in the square in an orderly manner. They looked very well trained. Then, a man riding a horse left the group and slowly came in front of Noah, Yair-bed, and the village chief. This man was probably the captain of this group of cavalrymen. He looked to be above 30 years old and not yet 40 years old. His body was quite tall and sturdy, and he was a standard burly man. Moreover, Noah could sense an aura and boldness from him that was completely different from that of ordinary soldiers and cavalrymen. Come to think of it, such a burly man was definitely not as simple as an ordinary soldier captain. Yair-bed also seemed to have clearly sensed this unusual aura. Although he did not sense any threat from this burly man, Yair-bed still tensed up his body and moved closer to Noah, just in case. Just like this, the burly man rode his horse and came in front of Noah, Yair-bed, and the village chief. He looked down at the three of them. "I am the captain of the warriors of the Ristage kingdom, Gejev Stolanov. Under the king's orders, I am patrolling the villages in order to suppress the imperial knights who are causing trouble nearby." The words of the burly man, who called himself Gejev Stolanov, startled the village chief. The captain of the kingdom's warriors? Obviously, the village chief knew about this man named Gejev Stolanov. Unfortunately, Noah and Yair-bed, who had just arrived in this world not long ago, were confused. I only heard about it." The village chief seemed to have thought about Noah and quickly explained. "The captain of the kingdom's warriors is currently in charge of commanding the elite soldiers directly under the king. He is the strongest warrior in the Ristage kingdom." "The strongest warrior?" Noah looked at Gejev Stolanov with interest. "The strongest warrior?" Yair-bed also looked at Gejev Stolanov, but he turned his head away after a while. Gejev Stolanov and the village chief, who were not familiar with Yair-bed, naturally thought that it was because Yair-bed's personality was too cold. Noah was the only one who knew that Yair Bade was slightly relieved. Although Gejef Stolanov's aura and courage were indeed extraordinary, and he was definitely not an ordinary warrior, neither Noah nor Yair Bed felt threatened by Gejef Stolanov. Although Gejef Stolanov was very powerful compared to other people, he was only able to enter the eyes of Noah and Yair Bed. He was far from being a threat. If such a person was the strongest warrior in the kingdom, then it was natural for Yair Bed to feel relieved. After all, this meant that at least in the kingdom, no one could pose a threat to them. Gejef Stolanov, who did not know this, just shook his head. It's only because of His Majesty's kindness that I was able to become the chief warrior. I can't be considered the strongest warrior. In this kingdom, there are many people who are stronger than me. While saying this, Gejef Stolanov's gaze was fixed on Yair Bed. There was no other way. Yair Bade's armor looked a little dangerous and eye-catching. In response, Noah seemed to want to divert Gejef Stolanov's attention. He suddenly said, "Is the chief warrior here to patrol? It's a pity that you came a little late." Hearing this, Gejef Stolanov's expression froze. Just as Noah had expected, he shifted his gaze from Yair Bed to Noah, and his gaze became extremely sharp. "Did something happen in this village? Just as you said, there were people causing trouble here." Noah shrugged as if he did not notice Gejef Stolanov's sharp gaze. "The villagers were almost slaughtered. If we did not happen to pass by, I'm sure that the village you saw would not be intact, right? Is that so?" Gejef Stolanov's expression darkened slightly as he looked straight at Noah. "Did you save this village?" "I just couldn't bear to see it." Noah nodded. "I hope it's not a busybody." Gejef Stolanov's steel-like expression immediately eased a lot. He flipped off his horse and came in front of Noah, bowing deeply. "How could it be a busybody? Thank you very much for saving this village." Seeing Gejef Stolanov's extremely sincere attitude, Noah's expression also eased a lot. As the chief warrior of the kingdom, even if Gejef Stolanov's identity and status could not be compared to the royal family, he should still belong to the privileged class. For such a person with such a high status to thank Noah so much for saving an insignificant village, it was enough to see Gejef Stolanov's character. With this thought in mind, Noah took a deep look at Gejef Stolanov and said, "But, Mr. Stolanov, is it really the Empire's knights causing trouble around here?" This sentence made Gejef Stolanov's eyes flicker slightly. After pondering for a moment, he replied, "That's what the report said." In other words, until now, Gejef Stolanov had not encountered the so-called Empire's knights. "Is that so?" Noah also pondered for a moment, and then suddenly said, "Mr. Stolanov shouldn't be a person who attracts hatred easily, right?" Gejef Stolanov's eyebrows suddenly twitched, and then his expression changed, and he became silent. Seeing this, Noah seemed to have understood something and smiled slightly. "If that's the case, you have to be careful." Gejef Stolanov still remained silent for a long time. Chapter 1172. After that, Gudjefu decided to ask the village chief some questions in order to find out more about the knights massacring the villagers of Khan village. Under such circumstances, Gudjefu was invited into the village chief's house. The cavalrymen that Gudjefu brought with him scattered around the village to keep watch. Noah, on the other hand, was strolling on the streets of Khan village with Yair Bade. After such a huge incident, the villagers of Khan village naturally couldn't live as they usually did. All of them hid in their houses and wouldn't come out unless something urgent happened. Moreover, the villagers who were resurrected wouldn't be alive all of a sudden. They still needed to be taken care of. In addition, the cavalrymen that Gudjefu brought with him were patrolling the village. The bloodstains left behind by the so-called imperial knights could be seen everywhere. Naturally, Noah and Yair Bade couldn't see anyone as they strolled along the streets. There was no one around. Yair Bade finally seemed to be willing to speak. He walked half a step away from Noah and spoke softly. "Sir Noah, did you discover something?" Noah turned his head and looked at Yair Bade. "Didn't you discover anything?" Yair Bade seemed to hesitate for a moment. He didn't know if he should say what he thought. Sir Noah, are you referring to the fact that the Imperial Knights are most likely people from the Celian theocracy in disguise? You saw through it as well? Noah spread his hands. Then, why did you ask me if I discovered anything? Because the conversation between Sir Noah and that human seemed to be a little strange, Yair Bade said cautiously. So, I was wondering if Sir Noah had discovered anything else. It's not really a discovery, right? Noah scratched his cheek. I just have some other guesses. Guesses? Yair Bade asked in confusion. That. What kind of guesses are you referring to? That's the motive of the theocracy's soldiers who pretended to be Imperial Knights. Noah didn't hide anything and smiled at Yair Bade as if he was keeping him in suspense. What do you think is the purpose of those theocracy soldiers pretending to be Imperial Knights? Noah's question made Yair Bade's heart tremble slightly, and he became highly focused. To Noah, this was perhaps just a casual question. But for Yair Bade, who viewed Noah as his master and had to be loyal to him, he had to do his best in order not to disappoint his master. Thus, as the chief guardian of Nazarek's underground tomb, Yair Bade focused his mind and began to think quickly. After a while, Yair Bade gave his answer. If this subordinate's guess is correct, there should be two purposes for the soldiers of the cult to disguise themselves as Imperial Knights. Oh? Noah asked curiously. Tell me about it. One of them is to sow discord between the kingdom and the empire, Yair Bade said. The theocracy has its soldiers pretend to be Imperial Knights and slaughter the kingdom's citizens. This will incite the kingdom's hostility towards the empire and cause the two kingdoms to fight each other. Once the kingdom and the empire have expended a large amount of resources and manpower, the theocracy will launch an attack. That way, it will be able to easily annihilate the two kingdoms and expand its own influence. That's not a bad idea, Noah nodded and said. At first, that's what I thought as well. At first? Yair Bade noticed the key words in Noah's words. In other words, Lord Noah doesn't think so now? That's right, Noah said as he continued to walk forward. The village chief said that the relationship between the kingdom and the empire is very bad, and there are wars all year round, right? Noah only gave him this hint, and Yair Bade immediately understood. I see, Yair Bade said in realization. The relationship between the kingdom and the empire has always been very bad. Even if there's no need to sow discord, they are still in war all year round. If the theocracy wants to reap the benefits without doing anything, then there's no need for it. That's it, Noah casually kicked away a small stone on the side of the road and said unhurriedly. That's why I've eliminated this guess. There's only one remaining possibility. The theocracy wants to use the empire's knights to harass the kingdom's borders and force the kingdom to react to this matter. Yair Bade explained Noah's guess as well as his own. For example, luring someone out of the kingdom or something like that. Smart. Noah was not stingy with his praise as he smiled at Yair Bade. As expected of the guardian of the great underground tomb, Yair Bade. It seems that I can trust you with a lot of things. Thank you for your praise, Your Eminence, Yair Bade said in a voice that was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart. Compared to me, Lord Noah must have already predicted all of this. My performance is nothing. I'm not as great as you make me out to be. Noah was amused at first, then he glanced at the village chief's house. Now, you should understand why I asked the kingdom's warrior that question, right? Yair Bade nodded in understanding. Just like what Yair Bade said, since the theocracy didn't want to sow discord between the kingdom and the empire, the theocracy must have wanted to use this opportunity to force the kingdom to react in a way that would satisfy them. For example, to eliminate the empire's knights that were harassing the borders, the kingdom's warrior captain would be sent out. In other words, the theocracy's goal was very likely to be Gujiefu. The kingdom's strongest warrior, Noah said with a half-smile. With such a title, it's impossible not to be targeted, right? Humans are indeed a bunch of stupid, inferior creatures, Yair Bade blurted out without using his brain to filter his words. Killing each other for power, what a worthless and stupid thing to do. Hearing this, Noah could only smile bitterly. Yair bade, I'm also a human. How can you compare the Almighty Supremes with those inferior creatures? Yair bade said in a tone without a trace of confusion. Lord Noah is different. Different? Perhaps. After all, ordinary people couldn't be like Noah, who had a strong connection to the world, and they couldn't be like Noah, who had the 3 great constitutions. From this point of view, Noah really couldn't be considered a human. At the very least, he was definitely not an ordinary human. However, Yair bade really looked down on humans. Even though he was slightly persuaded by Noah after the resurrection, his view of humans didn't change much. Of course, Noah didn't want Yair bade to change his view of humans. Although Noah was a human, he never thought of blindly supporting the entire human race. In Noah's eyes, the issue of race wasn't a big deal. The important thing was whether or not he could resonate with it. Ordinary villagers like Onli, who were simple and honest, would cry bitterly after encountering such a big change. Anyone with a bit of compassion would want to help her. Noah chose to resurrect the villagers mostly for this reason. As for those knights who enjoyed waving their blades at innocent people, no matter how tragically they died, no matter how tragically they cried, it wouldn't arouse the slightest bit of sympathy from Noah. Noah looked at things like this and just followed his heart. Otherwise, if he was really obsessed with race, Noah wouldn't have accepted the aberration tomb in Nasarek. As such, as long as Yair bade wasn't like those bloodthirsty people and didn't kill without reason, it was fine as long as Noah didn't want to see the desecration of life. As for his view of humans, Noah didn't want to change Yair bade's view. At this moment, Noah suddenly felt a strange feeling. It was as if something was spying on him. At that moment, Noah stopped in his tracks and raised his head to look into the distance. At the same time, Yair bade, who had stopped with Noah, emitted an evil aura. Who dares to spy on the great tombs of Nasarek? You deserve to die 10,000 deaths. Chapter 1173. At a place not far from Khan village, a man was closing his eyes. It was a middle-aged man who didn't look particularly outstanding, but there was a scar on his face. He was around 30 or 40 years old. At this moment, the middle-aged man was emitting a magical wave that was hard to identify. He was obviously using some kind of magic. Around this middle-aged man, there were people dressed like clerics. They were waiting for the middle-aged man to lead them. If it was someone who knew the ropes, they would be able to more or less guess the background of these people just by looking at their priest attire. Syrian theocracy. It was a country with a strong religious atmosphere and believed in God. This country believed in the 6 great gods that descended into this world a few hundred years ago. Because there were so many different gods, the gods that the people in the theocracy believed in were naturally different, resulting in the theocracy being divided into many factions. In the Syrian theocracy, there was a special intelligence unit called the 6 Color Scriptures. These special intelligence units were mainly involved in various kinds of work that were closely related to the country's policies and were indispensable. Now, the people who looked like priests gathered here were one of the 6 color scriptures of the Syrian cult, the Holy Scripture of Sunlight. The basic mission of the special intelligence unit called the Sunshine Scriptures was to annihilate the villages of the demi-humans. Because the Syrian theocracy advocated the supremacy of humans and advocated the elimination of all races other than humans, the Sunshine Scriptures had the most combat opportunities among the 6 special intelligence units of the Syrian theocracy. However, the number of people in this special intelligence unit was relatively small. Including the preparatory members, the total number of people was less than 100. In other words, those who could join the Sunshine Scriptures were the elites of the elites. Of course, the so-called elites were also relative. In this world, because of the variety of races, all kinds of strange powers existed. Among them, martial arts and magic were the mainstream. Magic was needless to say. Martial arts were skills that only powerful warriors could use. In this world, those who could use magic were usually called magic chanters. To a warrior, the the so-called martial arts techniques were as important as magic was to a magic chanter, having an effect similar to magic. For example, martial arts that could strengthen various aspects of the body. For example, martial arts that could attack in a wide range. For example, a martial skill that could allow one to slash at a speed that exceeded human limits. For example, a martial skill that could be used as a sure-kill skill. And so on and so forth. The numerous martial arts techniques created the creatures in this world. Even if most of them were unable to learn magic, they could still be active as warriors. Martial techniques, on the other hand, were not differentiated by levels. However, in this world, magic has an extremely strict hierarchy based on the concept of a rank. To be able to join the Scripture of Sunlight, one must be able to cast at least a third-order spell. Most spellcasters were only able to cast spells of the first order. Spellcasters who could cast spells of the second rank were considered rare among them. Magicians who could cast spells of the third order were considered to be the highest level of magic that ordinary magicians could learn. If they could surpass the third order and use fourth order magic, then this magic chanter would become a precious trump card of the human race. After all, in this world, it was generally believed that magic above the 7th grade could never be mastered by humans. Among humans, the highest level of magic that could be used was the 6th grade. From this, it could be seen how rare it was to have a magic chanter who could cast spells of the third order. The Scripture of Sunlight, on the other hand, had close to 100 people in its intelligence unit. It was conceivable that if they were to encounter the Scripture of Sunlight, even the demi-human tribes would not have a good ending. And now, such a unit had come for one person. That person was the captain of the Ristage Kingdom's warriors, Gejif Stolanov. Noah and Yair Bade's guess was correct. The reason why the Siren theocracy had disguised their soldiers as imperial knights was to lure Gejif out. However, in this process, there was an accident. Before Gejif arrived, the soldiers that the Siren theocracy had used to disguise themselves as imperial knights suddenly disappeared. Because of this, the Scripture of Sunlight's captain, Negan, was using a long-range intelligence-type magic to check the situation in Khan village. But at a certain moment, Purgatory, whose body was emitting faint mana fluctuations, suddenly opened his eyes and staggered backwards with a look of horror on his face. What was that? That terrifying aura just now. Just a moment ago, when Negan was using a long-range intelligence-type magic to check the situation in Khan village, he coincidentally saw two people. A man with black hair and black eyes. A fully armed woman. This man and woman, when Negan saw them, almost at the same time, they raised their heads and looked in his direction. Then, a terrifying evil aura suddenly erupted from the fully armed woman's body. What kind of aura was that? Negan did not know. Negan only knew that in that instant, the shadow of death shrouded his heart, causing his soul to scatter as he dispelled the magic. The members of the Sunshine's sacred scripture, who didn't know this, looked at Purgatory in confusion. However, Negan did not have the spare energy to pay attention to his subordinates, his shocked expression constantly changing. It had to be said that Negan was indeed a decisive person. Change of plans. Negan gritted his teeth and ordered in a low voice. We are retreating. This sentence naturally attracted a large wave of confusion. At this moment, the quality of the Scripture of Sunlight was displayed. Even if they were full of doubts, the surrounding members of the Scripture of Sunlight did not hesitate and followed Negan, preparing to retreat. Unfortunately, in this world, although the Scripture of Sunlight was very powerful, it did not mean that it could come and go as it pleased. Retreat? Just as the members of Sunshine Scripture were about to retreat, a voice that sounded like a smile slowly rang out. Since we have been lying in ambush here for so long, isn't it a little bad to leave without leaving anything behind? Such a sudden voice, like a drop of cold water, directly penetrated into the hearts of all the people present at the Sunshine Scripture. Who? Negan fiercely turned his head and swept his gaze around as he sternly asked. Who is it? Come out. Not only Negan, even the surrounding Scripture of Sunlight's members tensed up as they swept their eyes around as if they were facing a great enemy. In the next second, Negan seemed to have felt something as he suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. There, two figures were floating in the air as they looked down at everyone below. Negan could even see them. On one of the two figures, a pair of deep, pitch-black eyes met, and a silvery-white cold luster flashed within them. In that instant, Negan felt his hands and feet turn cold. His intuition told him. If this continued, he would definitely end up in an incomparably miserable state. Without any hesitation, Negan shouted, "Summon angels." Almost as soon as Negan's voice fell, the Scripture of Sunlight's members reached out their hands as light blossomed from them. Wang! Following a series of vibrations, magic formations appeared in front of the clerics and imprinted themselves on the ground. Inside, white figures slowly appeared one after another. They were figures that looked like mechas. They were clad in pure white armor and had shining wings on their backs. They also held light swords that seemed to be made of flames in their hands. That figure was indeed like what Negan had said. It was similar to a pure angel, but it looked like a man-made object. Attack! Negan spat out words filled with killing intent. Everyone attack! With that, the existence that Negan called angels flapped the wings on their back as they held the flame swords in their hands and shot into the sky. Chapter 1174. Whoosh! The whistling sound of the wind was incessant in the air, as if it was lingering in Noah's ears. Hovering in midair, Noah looked down at the scene of the numerous angels rushing toward him. The cold silvery white luster in his dark, deep eyes became even more intense. Upon closer inspection, Noah was able to hover in the air not because of Hermes' boots, but because of a necklace around his neck. It was a pure white necklace that looked like one of the wings of a flying bird. This necklace was also a magic tool. There was only one magic in it. Flight. Originally, Noah already had similar or even similar items, so Noah didn't take them from the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasarek. However, because this magic tool didn't have a limit on the number of times it could be used, and Hermes' boots couldn't be worn continuously under normal circumstances, Noah put on this necklace after he obtained a large amount of treasures from the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasarek and always wore it. After sensing that there were people spying on him in Khan village, Noah immediately activated the flight of the magic tool. Together with Yair Bade, they flew over using the magic aura left in the air by Purgatory's long-range intelligence magic. Then, they saw the people from the Sunshine Scripture. Needless to say, Noah could guess who they were. These people had their eyes on Gudjefu and disguised as imperial knights to wantonly massacre the troops of the Si Lien cult in Khan village. Noah narrowed his eyes when he saw the pure white figures that were called angels by Purgatory holding flaming light swords that looked like man-made mechas charging towards him. Wang! A pair of deep, dark eyes trembled and turned into a cold, silvery white color. In an instant, the angels charging in Noah's direction seemed to be frozen in space as they stopped moving. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, the pure white angels' bodies began to be covered in a cold steel color, gradually turning into heavy steel. Not long after, they turned into statues made of pure steel. Pang, 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 pang. The next moment, the statues made of pure steel smashed into the ground one after another under the guidance of gravity, stirring up a series of dull thuds and a thick cloud of dust. Wah! Purgatory was shocked. What kind of magic is that? Not to mention Purgatory, even the people from the Sunshine Scripture were in an uproar, their faces filled with shock. Not only because no one had seen this kind of magic before, but also because the angels were all taken care of in an instant. It had to be known that although those angels weren't real angels, they were still magical creatures summoned from the third level of magic. Magical creatures summoned from the third level of magic, and there were so many of them, but they were all taken care of in an instant. Could Gudjefu, who was considered the strongest warrior in the Liestage kingdom, do this? No. Definitely not. In other words, the level of this enemy that suddenly appeared was at least above Gudjefu's. You. Purgatory stared at Noah and spoke in a low voice. Who are you? Before he could finish speaking, Purgatory felt an extremely cold killing intent lock onto his body, causing his body to stiffen and his face to be filled with shock. This was because this cold killing intent was exactly the same as the evil aura that caused Purgatory's soul to scatter when he used a long-distance vision intelligence magic to investigate Khan village. At this moment, Purgatory finally noticed. Beside Noah, there was also a fully armed figure floating in the air. The ice-cold killing intent that had locked onto Purgatory's body came from that figure. Not only did you use magic to spy on our Honorable Supreme, you even used such a tone to speak to our Honorable Supreme. Yair seemed to be enduring something as her delicate body trembled slightly. Her voice was like that of a malicious spirit, incomparably evil. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will definitely tear you to shreds, you lowly creature. Instantly, with Yair as the center, the entire space darkened. A bone-chilling evil aura surged out from Yair body. Like a storm, the pitch-black evil aura caused Yair figure to suddenly become larger. It was as if an extremely large object was about to burst through the pitch-black armor and bring about an extremely despairing death. This caused everyone from the Sunshine Scripture to take a step back in horror. Even the people around him were in such a state. Negan, who was directly locked onto by Yair astonishing killing intent, felt even more indescribable. He felt as if all the blood in his body had turned cold, and his entire face had turned deathly pale in an instant. Damn. Damn it. Purgatory sensed that he, the leader of the Sunshine Scripture, actually felt such fear towards two people who he had only seen for less than 3 minutes. He resisted the urge to turn around and run. As he retreated, he reached into his clothes and took out an item. It was a piece of crystal. It had the shape of a glacier and was completely transparent. There was even a hexagonal crystal pillar embedded in the middle of the crystal that shone with an intoxicating radiance. Seeing that piece of crystal, Noah was slightly startled. This was because Noah had found many similar crystals in the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nasaric. He had even kept all of them in his own treasure vault, and they were currently lying there. Magic sealing crystal? Magic sealing crystal. It was similar to magic tools like scrolls, short staffs, and magic staffs. It could be used to activate the magic sealed within. There was also a magic tool like Yggdrasil in this world. Lord Noah. Yair also seemed to be surprised. Then, he held his giant axe and rushed in front of Noah. Please be careful. However, Noah's eyes flashed as he stared at Purgatory with his silver-white eyes. Crack. Purgatory raised a magic sealing crystal above his head and was about to use the magic tool. But just as he raised his hand, a strange sound came from his hand. Then, under Purgatory's gaze, the hand that was holding the magic sealing crystal suddenly had a cold metallic luster and slowly turned into heavy steel. Purgatory's eyes almost popped out. His empty hand clenched tightly onto the hand that was gradually turning into steel as he screamed. Hand! My hand! An indifferent voice responded to Purgatory's screams. I don't want that hand. Consider it the price for the villagers who were killed by you. As soon as the voice fell. Bang! Purgatory's hand that was gradually turning into steel suddenly exploded, turning into a pile of cold steel fragments that scattered all over the ground. The magic sealing crystal in his hand suddenly lost its support and fell to the ground. Ah! Purgatory's screams finally turned into cries of pain. He hugged his broken arm and let out a mournful wail. And Purgatory's miserable state caused the people from the Sunshine Scripture to panic. Ignoring the panic and fear of the Sunshine Scripture people, Noah glanced at Purgatory who was hugging his broken arm and said to Yair Capture them all alive and bring them back to Nasaric. Interrogate them and we should be able to obtain quite a bit of information about this world. Yes. Yair accepted the order without hesitation. He bent down and charged into the crowd like a ferocious beast. The battle ended in less than a minute. Noah landed on the ground and picked up the magic sealing crystal that had fallen in front of him. Noah, who was observing the magic sealing crystal, suddenly felt like he was being spied on. His brows twitched as he stretched out his other hand. A golden ripple rippled out and spat out a parchment-like scroll that fell into Noah's hand. Bang! The scroll suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes. Bang! At the same time, the sound of glass shattering could be heard from the sky. Immediately after, the feeling of being spied on disappeared. Surveillance by the theocracy? Noah looked pensive as he got up. Chapter 1175. One of the special intelligence units of the Celian theocracy, a powerful human team called the Sunlight Scripture, was completely annihilated in such a small village. Other than the Celian theocracy that sent out the Sunlight Scripture, no one else should know about this matter. Of course, it was also wrong to say that they were completely annihilated. With the idea of making use of whatever he could, Noah got Yair Bade to capture the people from the Sunlight Scripture alive and bring them back to the big tomb in Nazareth to obtain all the information about this world. This way, Noah did not need to personally investigate and inquire about every piece of information he obtained, which saved him a lot of effort. After handing this matter over to Yair Bade, Noah returned to Khan village alone. Initially, Yair Bade was quite opposed to this, as he felt that Noah could not be left without a single guard. In the end, it was Noah who persuaded him earnestly. Furthermore, the matter in Khan village was already over, and Noah promised that he would return to the big tomb in Nazareth after greeting him. Only then did Yair Bade reluctantly agree. Hence, Noah returned to Khan village. As he walked on the road to the village chief's house, he thought about what happened just now. So it was indeed the people from the Celian theocracy monitoring the actions of my subordinates, right? Before coming to this world, Noah had encountered all kinds of magical powers. However, the power systems in other worlds were not as troublesome as this world. For example, the power of intelligence magic that could perform long-distance detection and even perform long-distance vision to obtain all kinds of information from extremely far away was really too troublesome. However, such troublesome magic did not seem to be difficult to control, and seemed to be very versatile in this world. In this way, in order to avoid being targeted by people with ulterior motives, Noah had to consider all kinds of countermeasures. Fortunately, in Yggdrasil, all kinds of information-type magic were very common, so the defensive measures and methods were quite perfect. Although Noah had only obtained the general knowledge of the situation in Yggdrasil, he did not know how to deal with all kinds of magic. However, the underground tomb of Nazareth was once the stronghold of Ains ul Gong. Presumably, it should have a complete understanding of how to deal with this aspect. When we get back, I'll have Yair Bade and Demiurgos come up with a plan to deal with this. After making up his mind, Noah suppressed the various thoughts in his heart and walked towards the village head's house. Right at this moment, a steely voice called out to Noah. "Your Excellency Dole." Along with such a voice, a vigorous figure drilled out from the side of the street and slowly walked towards Noah. Noah stopped in his tracks and looked at the newcomer. The newcomer was the kingdom's warrior captain, Gudjefu. "Your Excellency Dole hasn't left yet?" Gudjefu said to Noah with a smile that could be either friendly or profound. "When I couldn't find Your Excellency Dole, I thought Your Excellency Dole had already left. It's about time to leave." Noah smiled faintly. "What? Your Excellency warrior captain, are you looking for me?" Hearing this, Gudjefu also smiled, but his eyes were looking straight at Noah as if he wanted to see something from Noah. "No, I just feel that Your Excellency Dole is indeed an amazing powerhouse." "Oh?" Noah raised his eyebrows. "Why do you say that?" Noah's words made Gudjefu's eyes flicker slightly. After a moment of silence, he said so. "Although I heard most of the process of Your Excellency saving this village from the village head and the villagers, after actually seeing it, I believe that anyone would think so, right?" After saying that, Gudjefu glanced at one of the directions. Noah followed Gudjefu's line of sight and immediately understood what Gudjefu meant. In the square of Khan village, the cavalrymen that Gudjefu brought with him were carrying heavy objects. Those were statues. They were made of cold steel, as if they were the statues of the knights who were howling in despair and pain towards the sky or their surroundings. They were the soldiers of the Syrian cult who attacked Khan village and were directly frozen into steel statues by Noah's icy smelting, to disguise themselves as imperial knights. Everyone in the village said that Your Excellency Dole turned the knights who attacked here into steel in an instant. Gudjefu showed a sincere expression of admiration. Although they are just ordinary knights, to be able to do such a thing, Your Excellency must be an amazing magician, right? Turning a living person into cold steel in an instant. To be able to do such a miraculous thing, in Gudjefu's knowledge, only magic could do that. Therefore, in Gudjefu's heart, he had long regarded Noah as a magician. If it's possible, I hope to have a good discussion with Your Excellency. Gudjefu suddenly smiled. But the imperial knights who rebelled have been killed, and I should return to the royal city to report. Why don't Your Excellency travel with me to the royal city? His Majesty would be very happy to meet a powerful magician like you, right? Gudjefu's words made Noah more or less tempted. Noah had just arrived in this world not long ago. Currently, he was in the same situation that he encountered every time he arrived in a new world. That was, his knowledge of the current world was severely lacking. If he could interact with the king of a kingdom, he should be able to obtain a lot of information, right? Therefore, accepting Gudjefu's invitation was definitely a good thing. If Noah was the only one who did it. I'm sorry, Your Excellency. Noah shook his head and tactfully rejected Gudjefu's invitation. I still have some acquaintances to take care of, so it's not convenient for me to leave. The matter of the underground tomb in Nasariq had just been put on the right track. If Noah left at this time, there would be a lot of problems in the underground camp, right? Most importantly, Yair Bade and the other guardians would definitely not let Noah go to the royal city without doing anything. At least, they would not be at ease letting Noah leave Nasariq alone. If the NPCs in the underground tomb in Nasariq were to be allowed to travel with him, and if those NPCs were like Yair Bade and had a disdainful attitude towards humans, then there would be a lot of unnecessary trouble in the royal city. Because of this, Noah chose to reject. Is that so? Gudjefu said regretfully. That's a pity. This regret was real. As the kingdom's warrior captain, Gudjefu was known as the strongest warrior in the country. Although Yair Bade did not think highly of Gudjefu, this man was indeed a real talent. Gudjefu's years of experience and sharp intuition that had been cultivated through battles made him faintly feel that this magic caster who would help when he saw injustice was definitely not an ordinary person. If he had to give a reason, it would probably be the complete opposite of Yair Bade's. Yair Bade did not feel the slightest threat from Gudjefu. However, Gudjefu felt a suffocating sense of danger from Noah's body. Gudjefu chose to trust his intuition. Therefore, in Gudjefu's heart, Noah was not only a magic caster, but also a powerhouse who was far more powerful than himself. If he could recruit such a powerful magic caster to the king's side, then the situation of the kingdom that was deeply involved in the frequent wars with the empire would definitely improve, right? Gudjefu thought so. Of course, Gudjefu did not think that Noah alone could completely solve the national situation of the kingdom. Therefore, Gudjefu only felt regretful. Well then, Your Excellency Dole, let's part ways here. Gudjefu bowed in the direction of Noah. Thank you again for saving this village. After saying that, Gudjefu turned around and slowly walked towards the direction of the square. Watching Gudjefu's back gradually disappear, Noah folded his arms in front of his chest and smiled softly. He's a respectable person. It's worth it to indirectly save his life. Chapter 1176. After parting ways with Gudjefu in Khan village, Noah greeted the village chief. After the village chief thanked him profusely, Noah used the ability of the Ains Uar Gong ring, and directly teleported back to the big underground tomb in Nasariq. The ability of the ring called Ains Uar Gong ring allowed the user to teleport between named rooms in the big underground tomb in Nasariq for an unlimited number of times. It could even teleport from the outside to the inside of the tomb. Therefore, using the power of the ring, even if he was 10 kilometers away, Noah could instantly return to the big underground tomb in Nasarek. However, if you use the Ring of Ains ul Gong, you won't be able to teleport to the throne room and the rooms of the guild members of Ains ul Gong. This included the room that Noah was currently living in. Therefore, Noah did not teleport directly to his room. Instead, he chose to teleport to the meeting room called the Round Table on the 9th floor of the basement. Then, he opened the door and walked in the direction of his room. In the big underground tomb of Nasarek, in addition to the combat maids of the Pleiades star cluster, who were used to defend against external enemies, there were many other maids and even male servants. The task of these people was naturally to take care of the cleaning and maintenance of the places that needed to be maintained and managed in the big underground tomb of Nasarek. After Noah came out of the round table, he met many maids and male servants along the way. After they respectfully saluted him, he returned to his room. Originally, Noah wanted to go to the bedroom to rest for a while and wait for the report that Yair Bade received from the people of the Sunshine Scripture. Unfortunately, before Noah could return to the master bedroom, there was a knock on the door. At that moment, Noah could only pull himself together and look in the direction of the door. "Come in." As soon as the voice fell, two people came in from outside. It was a combination of a man and a woman. As soon as they came in, the man and woman bowed respectfully in the direction of Noah. "Lord Noah, welcome back." "Yair Bade and Demiurgos?" Noah touched his nose. "I just came back, and you already found out?" "Sir Noah, are you tired?" Yair Bedard immediately looked at Noah with concern and guilt. "I'm really sorry to disturb Lord Noah at this time. If Lord Noah is tired, please return to your bedroom to rest. We'll take our leave first." Demiurgos nodded in agreement. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with this at all. It was as if nothing was more important than Noah's matter. In this regard, Noah could only laugh and shake his head. "I'm not so tired that I can't squeeze out time. You have something important to report, right?" Yair Bade and Demiurgos nodded at the same time. Noah scratched his cheek. "In that case, let's go to the office." "Yes." Jabez and Demiurgos answered without any hesitation. Then, under Noah's lead, the three of them entered the luxurious office together. Noah sat down on the exquisite black leather chair and looked at Yair Bade and Demiurgos. Yair Bade and Demiurgos first looked at each other. Then, Demiurgos took a step forward. "Lord Noah." Demiurgos took out a document. "We have completed the statistics regarding the management and operation of the great underground tomb in Nasarek." "Oh." Noah was surprised. "That's fast." After saying that, Noah reached out and took the document that Demiurgos handed to him. He began to flip through it. The great underground tomb in Nasarek was the base of a guild. Since it was the base of a guild, it needed various management and operations to maintain it. Using the great underground tomb in Nasarek as an example, there were not only NPCs in this base. There were also many aberrant monsters. Other than the 9th and 10th underground floors, there were a large number of aberrant monsters on each of the other 8 floors. They were directly controlled by the Guardians to defend against external enemies. Apart from the race, there were 2 types of monsters like this. One type was monsters that could automatically respawn. These monsters generally had very average attributes and levels. Their combat power was also very average. Even if they were killed, they could automatically respawn after a period of time. They were the standard soldiers. The other type was monsters that could not automatically respawn. The attributes and levels of these monsters were much higher than the average monsters. Their combat power was also the backbone of the core. They were the elites of the entire great underground tomb in Nasarek. However, once these monsters were killed, they would need to pay a fee to be summoned. Therefore, the gold coins obtained in Yggdrasil could be used to purchase various equipment, items. They could also be used to maintain the base of a guild. For example, the cost of summoning high-level monsters that could not automatically respawn, the cost of activating magic in the base of a guild, the cost of resurrecting dead NPCs, and so on. There were all kinds of costs. Under such circumstances, gold coins were an indispensable and important resource for a guild. The problem of money was only one of the aspects of management and operation. As for the other problems, they could be solved through the system settings in the game. However, in this place, he had to do it himself. Therefore, the problem of money naturally had to be placed first. After flipping through the information in his hands, Noah was suddenly surprised. Here, you can make all kinds of items? Yes. Demiurgos immediately answered as if he had expected Noah to ask such a question. After statistics, we found that there are many servants with subsidiary professions in Nasaric. Not only are there lifestyle professions like chefs, but there are also professions that make all kinds of items. As long as you have enough money and materials, you can make all kinds of items. This was good news. After coming to this world, the various items from Yggdrasil no longer had a source of supply. If there was a way to produce them themselves, it would definitely be good news. The problem is the amount of money and materials needed, Demiurgos said. As for materials, because the former Supremes left behind a room that was specially used to manage and operate the great underground tomb in Nasaric, there are all kinds of materials in the room, so there is no need for supplies for the time being. The problem lies in money. The expenses used to maintain the management and operation of the great underground tomb in Nasaric were naturally the gold coins from Yggdrasil. However, in this world, there was no such thing as gold coins from Yggdrasil. We have confirmed that the gold coins from Yggdrasil can continue to be used to maintain the base, but we can't be sure if the general currency in this world can be used in this aspect, Demiurgos reported truthfully. If the money in this world can play the same role as the gold coins from Yggdrasil, then we can obtain a source of maintenance expenses from this world. If it can't be used, the treasures stored in the treasure hall will be the only source. We have to reduce unnecessary expenses. If it was the former, then in the future, they would have to find ways to earn money from this world to maintain the operation of the great underground tomb in Nasaric. They could even continue to strengthen it. If it was the latter, then it would be a little troublesome. After all, there was no way to obtain the gold coins from Yggdrasil anymore. After understanding this, Noah muttered to himself for a while, then reached out a hand. A golden ripple fluctuated out from the space. Noah, who reached his hand into the golden ripple, took out a huge sack and threw it on the table, making a dong sound. Upon closer inspection, the sack was filled to the brim with gold coins. Although these gold coins don't belong to this world, they don't belong to the game either. Let's see if we can use these gold coins to pay for the maintenance of Nasaric's underground tomb, Noah said to Demiurgos. As for the money in this world, I will find a way to obtain it. Chapter 1177. There were mountains of gold coins in the treasure hall of Nasaric's underground tomb. Naturally, those gold coins were all from Yggdrasil. Based on the number of gold coins in the treasure hall of Nasaric's underground tomb, no one would believe it if they said it wasn't a lot. However, no matter how much gold there was, it would be used up one day. If the various management and maintenance costs of Nasaric's underground tomb could only be paid with gold coins from Yggdrasil, then the usage of these gold coins would have to be kept to a minimum. This way, many monsters that needed to be summoned wouldn't be able to be replenished effectively. The magic in every corner of Nasaric's underground tomb would also have to be turned on and off depending on the situation to save on the cost of activating the medium. The other aspects were the same. Therefore, whether or not gold coins other than Yggdrasil could be used to pay for the maintenance of Nasaric's underground tomb would affect the future development of Nasaric. In particular, if the gold coins from the Gate of Babylon could be used to pay for the maintenance of Nasaric's underground tomb, then Nasaric's underground tomb would undergo a period of great development and strengthening. After all, Noah's gold coins from the Gate of Babylon could be replenished automatically and would never be used up. If he could use the gold coins from the Gate of Babylon to pay for the maintenance, then Nasaric's underground tomb would have to undergo great development and strengthening. For example, Noah only needed to throw in money and summon a bunch of high-level monsters. If he threw in tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of monsters, then conquering the world would be a piece of cake. On the other hand, if he couldn't use the gold coins from the Gate of Babylon to pay for the maintenance fees, then he would have to consider whether he could obtain gold coins from other sources to pay for the maintenance fees. Thinking of this, Noah felt that he really needed to go to the surface again. Understood. Demiurgos stepped forward and easily picked up the sack full of gold coins that Noah threw on the table. He then respectfully retreated and bowed in the direction of Noah. Then, Lord Noah, I'll take my leave first. Go. Noah nodded. After watching Demiurgos leave the room, he turned his gaze to Yerbade. Yerbade, you also have something to report? Yes. Yerbade bowed with a gentle smile on his beautiful face. Regarding the problem in Khan village, Lord Noah's orders are already in progress. Hearing this, Noah's expression eased slightly. There was no doubt that Khan village was just a stepping stone used by the sea life theocracy to plot against Gejef. Out of sympathy for this innocent village, Noah used resurrection items to resurrect the dead villagers, but Noah didn't want to get into trouble because of this. Not to mention other things, if the news that Noah could resurrect the dead was spread, then no matter if it was someone with ambition or not, they would all set their sights on Noah, and then on the big tomb in Nasarek, or even on Khan village. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Noah had already informed the village chief before Gejef led the cavalry into Khan village. He told him that this matter must not be exposed. Then, while Noah ordered Yerbade to bring the people of the Sunshine Scripture back to the big tomb in Nasarek, he also asked Yerbade to organize a team that could use magic and special skills that could affect the mind and memory. The team would be led by Yerbade and Marley, who were experts in investigation, to sneak into Khan village and operate on the resurrection of the villagers' memories. Come to think of it, after today, the resurrection event in Khan village would completely disappear. That way, it would be a good thing for the villagers of Khan village. Now, Noah was only concerned about one thing. Then, Noah looked straight at Yerbade. After the team led by Yerbade and Marley left, did anything strange happen? Noah didn't forget the reason why he came to this world. That was to prevent the big tomb in Nasarek from having a major impact on this world, or even causing this world to be destroyed. If the existence of the big tomb in Nasarek could have an inexplicable impact on this world, then what would cause it to appear? Let alone Noah, even Gaia and Alea didn't know the answer to this question. That was why they needed Noah to personally come in and see the situation. Originally, if they directly wiped out the big tomb in Nasarek, the problem would be completely solved. However, Noah, who had gained the loyalty of the NPCs in the big tomb in Nasarek, naturally couldn't do such a thing. That meant he had to pay attention to all aspects. Perhaps the moment the creatures in the big tomb in Nasarek stepped onto the surface, the world itself would be affected. Perhaps the creatures in the big tomb in Nasarek would only be able to destroy the world itself if they wiped out all life in the world. Or perhaps, no matter what the creatures in the big tomb in Nasarek did in this world wouldn't be affected. All these possibilities required Noah to confirm them one by one. What Noah hoped the most was that the existence of the big tomb in Nasarek wouldn't affect this world. And if that was the case, Noah had no choice but to think of another way. Perhaps seeing Noah's interest in this matter, Yerbade slightly closed his eyes, and a faint magic fluctuation appeared on his body. Noah knew that Yerbade was using a magic called message. It was a magic used for communication. Yerbade, who was using this magic, should be contacting Yerbade and Marley, who were heading to Khan village. After a while, Yerbade opened his eyes and smiled. Please rest assured, Lord Noah. Yerbade and Marley didn't notice anything strange. If anything strange happened, Yerbade and Marley would immediately bring their troops back. That's good. Noah secretly sighed in relief, but hesitated. Seeing Noah's reaction, Yerbade spoke at the right time. Lord Noah seems to be troubled. Can you let Yerbade share your worries? Hearing this, Noah was silent for a while, then looked at Yerbade. Actually, the big tomb in Nasarek might have some negative effects on this world, so I don't know if we should restrict the movements of the people in Nasarek. This was the problem that Noah was most worried about. No matter what, the big tomb in Nazareth had to be connected to this world, or else it wouldn't be able to survive. Let's not talk about anything else, just the maintenance costs. If they didn't go to the surface and obtain resources from this world, sooner or later, the whole tomb in Nazareth would be paralyzed. If the tomb in Nazareth was allowed to come into contact with this world, it might have an effect on the world itself. The two completely contradictory problems made Noah quite troubled. Moreover, Noah didn't really want to restrict the movement of the people in Nazareth. After all, he couldn't let the people here stay underground forever, right? After understanding Noah's worries, Yair nodded in realization. So, Lord Noah is so cautious about not letting the people in Nazareth go to the surface? But I can't always stop you from going to the surface. Noah sighed. So, Yair, I hope you can pay more attention in the future. No, I should say pay special attention to the activities of Nazareth on the surface. If there are any abnormalities, you must report to me immediately. Yes, Lord. Yair chose to obey without any reason. Noah nodded in satisfaction, then continued to flip through Demiurgo's management and operation statistics. Noah didn't notice that Yair was looking at him with an infatuated expression. Ah. Lord Noah is so handsome when he's working hard. Chapter 1178. In any case, Noah was delighted to learn that he could make his own items from Yggdrasil in the underground tomb of Nazareth. The various items from Yggdrasil that he had obtained from the treasure hall in the underground tomb of Nazareth were quite useful. Some of them were extremely magical and could achieve effects that even mythical relics could not. Therefore, even if he was not a collector, Noah wanted to collect as many items from the game as possible to deal with various situations in the future. Of course, the items that could be made in the underground tomb of Nazareth were only a part of the items. They could not make all the items in Yggdrasil. This was especially true for those rare and precious items. There were very few of them that could be made by themselves. Even so, it was much better than not being able to make anything. After confirming the various management and operations of the underground tomb of Nazareth, Noah began to operate the entire underground tomb of Nazareth. Yair and Demiurgos were still discussing the specific plan. Zaisha, Yal, Mer, Cositas, and the other guardians were in charge of assisting the two of them. They managed the operations of the various floors while deciding on the direction of the plan. The Sunshine Scripture group that Yair had brought back to the underground tomb of Nazareth were treated as a source of information. The guardians used various methods to obtain all kinds of information. Noah had no way of knowing how miserable these people ended up, nor was he interested in finding out. A group of people who could slaughter innocent villagers without hesitation to complete a mission must have done similar things many times. Since they could do cruel things to others, it was natural for them to be treated cruelly. This was probably an eye for an eye, right? Under such circumstances, Noah gradually learned all kinds of information from this world. Therefore, for the next period of time, Noah worked on the management of the underground tomb of Nazareth while collecting information from this world. His days were quite busy. In the underground tomb of Nazareth, most of the mutant creatures lived much more conveniently than humans. For example, vampires, zombies, skeletons, and other undead creatures that were transformed from the dead did not need to eat, sleep, or even other physiological needs. They could move around 24 hours a day. They had much more time and convenience than humans. Noah was still a human after all. However, in Yggdrasil, there were also items that allowed people to not need to eat or feel tired. With the effects of these items, Noah could also not eat or sleep. However, in this way, even if there were no physical problems, the accumulated mental fatigue would become very terrifying. Therefore, even if there were such items, Noah did not use them. He still ate 3 meals a day and slept well. Even if his life was not comfortable, it was still very fulfilling. In such a life, Noah had to face an extremely troublesome problem every day. Noah, who was a little concerned about the progress of the production of the props, had just returned to his room and opened the door to the master bedroom when an extremely sweet voice rang out. "Welcome back, Lord Noah." Hearing this voice, Noah, who was originally a little absent-minded, first froze, then his body softened. He weakly raised his head and looked into the bedroom. He saw that on the bed that was luxurious enough to fit 4 or 5 people, there was a naked Yair wrapped around herself with a thin blanket. Her face was slightly red, and her eyes were swaying. She looked at Noah shyly. "Are you going to eat me first? Or are you going to eat me first? You're going to eat me first, right?" Such a scene would happen at least once a day. He did not know how, but every time, Yair would arrive at Noah's room before Noah. She would go into the master bedroom, take off all her clothes, and greet Noah with this appearance. It had to be said that this scene was quite fatal for men. In the past, when the S-rank magic shooter promotion exam was about to be held, Noah, who had returned home after working hard, was greeted by Mira and Lisanna in a somewhat joking manner. At that time, Noah could not hold himself back. Amidst the screams and screams of Mira and Lisanna, he pressed the 2 delicate fiancées down. Whether it was in terms of appearance or figure, Yair would not lose to Mira and Lisanna. With Yair's peerless beauty, even if Noah could control his rationality, he would still be aroused. However, every time Yair tempted Noah like this, Noah only had one impulse. The impulse to turn around and run. It was not that Noah looked down on Yair. Instead, it was Yair's shy smile that made Noah feel a chill run down his spine. It was an extremely explicit desire hidden under Yair's smile. That could already be described as beastly desire, right? If Yair had shown a bashful expression of wanting to be pushed down, then Noah might not have been able to control himself. However, Yair had never shown a passive seduction, but an active seduction. It was not a bashful expression of wanting to be pushed down. Instead, it was a crazed expression of wanting to swallow Noah whole, skin and bones, and eat him up. Therefore, Noah knew that once he showed that kind of intention, Yair would instantly turn into the most terrifying carnivorous beast. She would lock him up, strip him naked, and entangle him for 3 days and 3 nights. As a result, which man wouldn't be sweating profusely? At least, Noah almost broke out in cold sweat the first time. And when Noah froze, Yair seemed to be a step ahead of him. She pressed on the sheets while leaning forward, crawling towards Noah, the redness on her face becoming more and more intense. "You must be tired, right? Please hurry up and go to bed." Noah did not even think and shook his head vigorously like a rattle drum. "Please don't feel shy, Lord Noah." Yair acted as if she did not see anything, sticking out her red tongue and licking her lips. "Actually, you only need to close your eyes for a moment, and it will be over very quickly. Just leave everything to me, I will definitely squeeze you dry, until you are satisfied." "You definitely just wanted to squeeze me dry, right?" Noah could not help but speak up. He even took a step back and pointed at Yair. "Yair, don't be like this. We have a very pure relationship between a superior and a subordinate. If you make the atmosphere all pink, it will be very difficult for me." "Lord Noah, you don't have to feel difficult." Yair shyly tugged at the sheets, not caring about her occasionally exposed fair skin. She actually revealed an expression that made people think of drooling. "As a subordinate, I should make my master feel comfortable." While saying this, Yair vaguely glanced at Noah's lower body. No matter what it is, Noah really wanted to turn around and run away. This peerlessly beautiful girl in front of him was really too dangerous. Even a carnivore was not so terrifying. At this moment, Yair was already panting heavily, her face was flushed to the extreme. She looked at Noah with a burning gaze, and even her body was tense. She looked as if she was ready to pounce on Noah at any time. Noah finally could not stand it anymore. I remember now." Noah stepped back and smiled embarrassedly. "Today is the day I decided to go to the human city. Yair, I'll leave this matter to you." After saying this, Noah ran away amidst Yair's screams. Woo 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 woo. I failed again. As soon as the door was closed, a burst of vulgar roars sounded from inside the room, causing cold sweat to flow down Noah's forehead. Why? Why am I reduced to running away from my own room every day? Just as Noah was about to die, a voice transmitted into Noah's mind. It was a voice that was directly transmitted using the message, magic. Lord Noah, everything is ready. Only then did Noah pull himself together. Chapter 1179. Ye Lantir. This was an important city located at the border of the Bahaz Empire and the Syrian cult nation, but it belonged to the kingdom of Restige and was connected to the three nations. The city was surrounded by 3 layers of city walls, which protected the inside and outside of the city. Each town within the city walls had its own unique features. The outermost layer of city walls was used as the kingdom's garrison base, which was an area with complete military equipment. The innermost layer of the city was the central administrative area of the city, where there was a warehouse for military food reserves, which was a heavily protected area. The middle area between the 2 areas was the residential area for the citizens. In this area, there were a few rather vast squares. The largest one was called the Central Square. Many people set up stalls there, selling all kinds of goods. Beside the bustling crowd, the owners of the stalls were shouting at the pedestrians on the street. Here, the sound of bargaining could be heard everywhere. Here, the sound of laughter and conversation could be heard everywhere. It was believed that no matter who it was, they would be able to experience the true feeling of life here, which made people feel quite peaceful. However, if one observed carefully, one would be able to notice. In such a lively square, from time to time, people would appear from the buildings on both sides of the square. They were either equipped with long swords or leather armor. There were even people who were fully armed to the teeth and wearing heavy full-body armor. For these people who did not fit in with the life around them, the surrounding residents only glanced at them once or twice, and then ignored them. Clearly, it was not rare to see such people who did not fit in with their surroundings. Therefore, the surrounding residents were already used to it. However, at a certain moment, the residents in the square all focused their attention in one direction, and their eyes were all filled with amazement. They saw that, in the place where many of the residents' amazement converged, a man and woman were strolling on the street. Although the man could not be said to be everywhere, he had a rare young man with black hair and black eyes. The woman had the same black hair and black eyes as the man, and her beautiful long black hair was tied into a ponytail, hanging behind her back. She was wearing a dark brown robe, and there was a long sword at her waist. She had an extremely delicate appearance, and was filled with the charm of an exotic girl. This pair of man and woman attracted the attention of all the residents present. There were 2 reasons. One was naturally the stunning appearance of the ponytailed girl. The other reason was that both the man and woman had an otherworldly temperament. It was this extraordinary temperament that attracted the attention of the surrounding residents. Of course, temperament was something intangible. It could attract the attention of others, but most of the people who were attracted to it did not understand why they were attracted to it. Simply put, there was an inexplicable sense of existence that made people unable to ignore such a pair of man and woman. This was especially true for the ponytailed girl. She had an exquisite and beautiful appearance that captured the eyes of many men present. The ponytailed girl did not have any expression on her face, but the displeasure in her eyes could be faintly detected by attentive people. Coincidentally, the person the young girl was following was such a meticulous person. "What's wrong?" Noah asked with a faint smile. "You don't like being the center of attention, Annabelle?" "Of course." Annabelle answered without hesitation. A bunch of short-sighted lowly life forms. If they could just catch a glimpse of the face of the utmost exalted, that would be an immense blessing. To think that they would dare to ignore the existence of Lord Noah right now. This is truly infuriating. It seemed that Annabelle was not unhappy because she was the center of attention, but because she felt that Noah should be the one to bear the attention, not her. Annabelle was unhappy because most of the surrounding residents were paying attention to her stunning appearance, not the master whom they obeyed. For Noah, Annabelle's answer could be said to be both within and outside of his expectations. This was because the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarek basically had an attitude of obeying Noah's orders and everything in their lives. This made Noah feel very touched sometimes, but also quite helpless sometimes. At that moment, Noah looked around and looked at the armed personnel who seemed out of place with the surroundings. Are those the adventurers of this world? The so-called adventurers, in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, referred to those combat experts who were engaged in the exploration of the dungeon. In this world, the adventurers were engaged in a wider range of work. Just like in the world of looking for a chance encounter in the dungeon, this world also had an adventurers guild. The main function of this guild was very similar to that of the magic shooter guild in the world of fairy tale. It was to post commissions from other people and let adventurers choose from them, so that they could complete various commissions and earn commission rewards. In other words, the adventurers were similar to multifunctional mercenaries in this world and also similar to the magic shooters in the world of fairy tale, but in terms of status, they were not as favored as the magic shooters and were closer to the mercenaries. After all, the main job of the adventurers was to eliminate all kinds of monsters that threatened humans. Chapter 1180. In fact, after this period of getting along, Noah more or less understood the fact that the loyalty of the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarek was basically impossible to have a problem. This did not mean that Noah believed that the settings in the game would continue in this world, but it was a rational judgment. No matter which race it was, the meaning of survival was necessary. If there was no meaning of survival, then how could it be considered alive? The NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarek regarded loyalty to their ruler as their meaning of survival. This was because these NPCs were originally created for this purpose. In other words, as long as Noah's meaning of survival did not go wrong, then the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarek were basically impossible to betray. Even if Noah was a rude and unreasonable person, it was the same. This could already be seen from the last test of the Guardians. That was why Noah wasn't surprised that Annabelle was as loyal and respectful as ever. He just felt emotional that his words back then hadn't been able to sway this combat maid. Of course, those things were no longer important now. After all, Noah had decided to accept the loyalty of the NPCs in the big underground tomb of Nasarek, right? It was precisely because of this loyalty that Annabelle was somewhat unable to accept letting her, who was not strong enough, guard Noah. As if seeing through Annabelle's thoughts, Noah shook his head with a smile. Well, you don't have to think so much. Regardless of whether I need protection or not, from the perspective of a guard, you are not unsuitable. Even if you are not as good as the full-level Guardians, your level is enough to dominate this world. According to the information obtained from the people of Sunshine Scripture, and compared it with the game Yggdrasil, Noah more or less understood how high the power system of this world was. To be more precise, it should be said that he understood how high the power system of humans in this world was. In this world, adventurers had their own level. This level was usually identified by a metal identification plate. Depending on the abilities of the Adventurers Guild would grant them identification plates made of different metals. These metal identification plates were made of copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, orichalcum, and stainless steel, according to their hardness and preciousness. There were a total of 8 kinds of metal identification plates, which were copper, iron, silver, gold, platinum, mithril, mountain copper, and stainless steel. The closer it was to steel, the stronger the adventurer's ability would be. Based on the levels in Yggdrasil and this world's spellcaster levels, the division should be like this. Adventurers with bronze and iron plates were generally equivalent to level 1 to 7 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to spellcasters who could cast spells of the first order. Silver and gold adventurers were generally equivalent to level 8 to 14 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use second-level magic. Platinum and mithril adventurers were generally equivalent to level 15 to 21 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use third-level magic. Bronze adventurers were generally equivalent to level 22 to 28 in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use 4th level magic. The highest level of steel adventurers were generally equivalent to level 29 and above in Yggdrasil. They were equivalent to magic chanters who could use 5th level magic. Gujefu, who was known as the strongest warrior in the kingdom, was equivalent to a level 35 warrior. In other words, for the entire human race, level 35 was considered the limit. In fact, people who reached this limit were usually called heroes. Noah didn't know if there was anyone in this world who could break through this so-called limit of humans. Because, by the time the interrogation reached this point, the people who came from the Book of Sunshine were basically all dead. However, even if there were people who could break through this limit, since it was called a limit, it couldn't be easily surpassed. Therefore, Noah estimated that the people in this world, in terms of humans, even if there were people who could break through level 35, there would be no more than 10. In this way, Annabelle, who had reached level 63, was basically invincible among humans. As for Noah himself, even if he didn't use Authority, Demon Slayer, and Gate of Babylon, he could still compete with the strongest level 100 Guardian, Zaisha, who was the strongest in one-on-one combat. In a human city where the highest level was level 35, it was impossible for anything to happen. If it weren't for the fact that there weren't any guards, the Guardians would definitely make a big fuss. I wanted to run out alone. Noah smiled at Annabelle. So, I'll leave my safety to you, Annabelle. Don't let me down. Hearing this, Annabelle's heart warmed. She suddenly knelt on the ground on one knee, offering the highest level of courtesy to Noah, and spat out a strong and powerful voice. I will definitely protect the safety of the Supreme Sovereign with my life. Such a strong and powerful voice echoed in the surroundings, making the residents who were faintly paying attention to Annabelle show a shocked expression, and looked at Noah with a strange face. Then, a flurry of discussion and pointing fingers at Noah were directed at him. Noah's face was completely frozen. Looking at Annabelle, who didn't care about the surrounding gazes and knelt on one knee to offer her loyalty to him, the corners of Noah's eyes twitched. The scene of a girl who was unbelievably beautiful in all aspects kneeling on one knee to a man on the street was really too beautiful. At the very least, Noah's scalp was numb from the whispers and discussions around him. He quickly bent down, grabbed Annabelle's hand, and slipped away amidst Annabelle's exclamation. Ylantir was the nearest city to the great underground tomb in Nasarek. Noah chose to come to this city for this reason. The main purpose of coming to this city was to obtain the money of this world, and see if it could be used to pay for the maintenance of the great underground tomb in Nasarek. So, in the best-case scenario, Noah hoped to be able to obtain a large amount of money to use in experiments. In view of this, the most effective way was, of course, to sell valuable treasures in exchange for a large amount of money. And the most valuable treasure was none other than a magical weapon that could unleash magical effects. So, Noah brought a dagger to the largest equipment store in Ylantir. The shop owner, who was about 30 years old, took the dagger that was entirely green in color with trembling hands, and even his voice was trembling. Top quality. This is definitely a top quality item. Hearing this, Noah more or less muttered in his heart. The level of the equipment in this world could be seen from the level of power in this world. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Noah did not take out any divine weapon or legendary level equipment. He did not even dare to take out any holy relic equipment, and only took out a heritage level dagger. In the end, it still amazed the owner of the largest equipment store in this important military city. However, this could more or less estimate the value of the equipment in this world. So, Noah pretended to be calm and suddenly smiled. This poison dagger has poison magic attached to it. As long as it grazes the skin, even a magical creature with great immunity to poison will die instantly. Unless one has achieved true immunity to poison, otherwise, whoever is grazed by it will die. I think the shop owner should be able to give me a good price, right? This is indeed a rather powerful magical weapon. The shop owner wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and a trace of greed appeared in his eyes as he looked at the poison dagger. After hesitating for a while, he spoke tentatively. How about this? I'll buy it for 500 gold coins. What do you think? 500? Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a smile that was not a smile. I say, shop owner, don't tell me you want to bully me? Ha. The shop owner laughed dryly. The price can be discussed, it can be discussed. However, just as these words were spoken, a voice rang out. That dagger, let me see. Chapter 1181. That dagger, let me have a look. When such a voice echoed throughout the equipment store, a series of footsteps also entered the store. Noah was slightly startled. He turned his head and looked towards the entrance. Then, he was stunned again. This was because the three people who entered the store surprised Noah quite a bit. It was mainly in terms of appearance. The first person that entered Noah's sight was a big guy. One of them was rather thick and strong. He had a pair of thick arms, and the diameter of his neck was about the size of a young girl's thighs. His eyes were fierce like that of a ferocious beast, and he had short golden hair. He was a big guy who only cared about practicality. Of course, big guys weren't rare. Noah had seen quite a few of them. However, the bulging chest muscles that looked like they had been thoroughly forged told Noah that this big guy was a female. It was definitely Noah's first time seeing a woman with such a bulky body. Next to the big guy, as if to create a sharp contrast, there was a petite girl who looked like an 11 or 12-year-old child. The girl was wearing a pitch-black robe that covered her entire body. She also wore a strange mask with a vermilion gem embedded on her forehead. It completely covered her face, and only the part where her eyes were slightly cracked open. Other than that, nothing else could be seen. The reason why Noah knew that the other party was a young lady was because the long robe was sticking tightly to the other party's body under the blowing of the wind, allowing Noah to keenly discern a slender and graceful figure. As for the third person, it was the one who had just spoken. It was also a girl. She was wearing a pitch-black undergarment and standing in the shadows, as if she was going to blend into the surrounding darkness and disappear at any time. Her entire body carried an aura that was incompatible with the light. The appearance of these three extremely unique people stunned even Noah, let alone the shop owner. However, the shop owner noticed something else. On these three people who suddenly broke in, there was a metal plate hanging on each of them. A piece of sparkling metal plate that shone with a strange brilliance. Its whole body was like cold steel, but ordinary steel was absolutely incomparable to it. That kind of metal was called steel. Seeing the metal plate made of steel, the shop owner exclaimed out loud. Steel. Steel-level adventurer? Yes. Only adventurers would wear metal plates. And adventurers who wore metal plates made of steel were naturally the highest level of steel adventurers. Among the humans in this world, they were also the strongest. Annabelle almost subconsciously put her hand on the hilt of the long sword at her waist. In a flash, she rushed in front of Noah and cast her sharp eyes forward. The big woman suddenly reacted to this and took a step forward fiercely. In the bang sound of footsteps that made the ground tremble slightly, her ferocious beast-like eyes were also cast on Annabelle. From the oppressive force emerging from this big woman, coupled with that lean figure, I believe that even a brave man would be scared off, right? However, this pressure was like a gentle breeze to Annabelle. It was unable to cause even the slightest change in her expression. Her sharp eyes began to turn ice cold. This made the big woman a little surprised. A ferocious smile that absolutely matched her appearance appeared on her tough face. You're quite brave. As a woman, it's quite rare. And you're so beautiful that I can't bear to lay my hands on you. Hearing the words of the big woman, Annabelle just had a cold face. She looked at the other party as if she was looking at a dirty insect, and some murderous aura began to emerge from her body. However, before the murderous aura gushed out of Annabelle's body, Noah spoke. Step back, Annabelle. With one sentence, the murderous aura all over Annabelle disappeared without a trace at once. Her face also returned to the initial expressionless face. She slowly relaxed her body and retreated behind Noah. This scene finally made the three fine steel adventurers discover the existence of Noah. They also understood that the beautiful girl who confronted the fine steel adventurers fearlessly just now was following this person's lead. Ignoring the three fine steel adventurers in front of him, Noah nonchalantly took the poison dagger from the stunned shop owner and held it in front of him. "Do you want to see this dagger?" Noah's words made the girl who seemed to be about to blend into the shadows raise her head and look at the poison dagger. She made a flat, emotionless voice. "Are you going to sell this dagger?" "If I wasn't selling it, I wouldn't have brought it here." Noah twirled the dagger in his hand as if he wasn't afraid of being cut by the poison magic on it. He shrugged. "It's just that I'm not very satisfied with the price of the shop owner. If you want it, as long as you give me a satisfactory price, then it's yours." Suddenly, the girl's eyes were completely focused on the poison dagger. She couldn't shift her gaze away. After hearing Noah's words, the shop owner couldn't help but open his mouth as if he wanted to say something. But when he remembered that the person who wanted the poison dagger was the highest level fine steel adventurers in the kingdom, he immediately deflated and closed his mouth. At this time, the petite girl in the cloak raised her head slightly and spat out a voice. "Tina, do you want that dagger?" It was a voice that didn't have a specific age. At most, it could be barely determined that it was a girl, but it also seemed to be old. It was a somewhat deep and flat voice that didn't carry any emotions. "You suddenly turned into this shop because you saw this dagger, right?" The burly woman used her coarse voice to suppress the incredulous voice and said, "Don't you already have the vampiric blade? You don't need a weapon, right? I'm an assassin." The girl called Tina glanced at the large woman expressionlessly. "Even if you're interested in this dagger, there's nothing strange about it, right?" Gigran. To put it simply, the girl called Tina wasn't interested in the poison dagger's preciousness, but its instant death effect. "That's true." The large woman called Gigran nodded indifferently. "Anyway, we just happened to pass by this city. If we can gain something, then it's worth it." In Yelanter, there wasn't the highest level fine steel adventurers. In the kingdom known as Yestage, there were only two small teams that could reach the level of fine steel adventurers, and they weren't adventurers from Yelanter either. The fine steel adventurers in front of them were obviously a small team. It was also very obvious that they weren't adventurers from this city, but rather from another city. So, saying that they just happened to pass by should be correct. The girl called Tina nodded and looked at Noah. "I can buy your dagger for 1,000 gold coins, but I don't have that many gold coins on me. If you're willing, you can come with us to the Imperial City." "Go to the Imperial City?" Noah frowned slightly. "Kid, you won't lose out by coming all the way here for 1,000 gold coins, right?" Gigran cracked a smile and said so. "If you're worried about being attacked by demons on the way, then there's no need for that. Come with us, I guarantee that there's nothing safer than this." Annabelle, who was waiting beside Noah, closed her eyes slightly and murmured without leaving a trace. A bunch of Turbolarians, obviously. In Annabelle's heart, Gigran's words were overestimating his own abilities. Although the fine steel adventurers were at least level 29 powerhouses, with the level 63 Annabelle around, why would they need the protection of these people? In addition, Annabelle was an abnormal creature and looked down on humans just like Yael Bedard, so there was such a reaction. Fortunately, Gigran and the others didn't hear it. Otherwise, they might have already fallen out with each other. The Imperial City? Noah couldn't help but think of the upright warrior captain. After pondering for a while, he nodded. "All right, I'll go with you." Gejef was the warrior captain of the kingdom. He believed that such an existence could provide Noah with a good way to earn money, right? Chapter 1182. After that, Noah found out that the three adventurers who wanted to buy the poison dagger from him belonged to one of the only two fine steel teams in the kingdom of Leastage, the Blue Rose. It was said that the leader of this fine steel team, named Blue Rose, was a noble of the kingdom. There were a total of 5 members in the team, and all of them were women. Although they were all women, in terms of strength, they were all among the top powerhouses of the human race. Otherwise, in the entire kingdom, there would not be only 2 teams that could reach the fine steel level. For such an existence to come to Yelantir where there were no fine steel adventurers, it was no doubt that they were the real center of attention. Therefore, as soon as they left the equipment store, the 3 fine steel adventurers went into the alley, leaving Noah with only one sentence. Let's meet at the city gate. We will prepare the carriage. After leaving such a sentence, the 3 fine steel adventurers who were very eye-catching in all aspects disappeared into the alley. After the 3 of them had all left, Annabelle approached Noah slightly and spoke softly. Sir Noah, do you really plan to go to the capital? Yes. Noah nodded without turning his head. There, I should be able to find a way to make money easier. But, is that okay? Annabelle could not help but ask. Don't you need to discuss it with Sir Yerbade first? You just need to inform Yerbade. Noah thought for a while and said. Anyway, with the message, we can keep in touch at any time. Even if something really happens, we can instantly teleport back to the big underground tomb in Nasarick. There's no need to worry too much. The last time, when Gudjefu invited Noah to the capital, Noah was already tempted. However, because the operation of the big underground tomb in Nasarick had not been officially opened, Noah did not accept Gudjefu's invitation. Now, the operation of the underground tomb in Nasarick was on track. With Yerbird and Dimiyagos around, there was no need for Noah to personally take care of the management. Coupled with the most important issue of money, it was now necessary for him to make a trip to the royal capital. Understood. Yerbade nodded obediently, then pressed a finger to his temple. Then, I'll report this matter to Lord Yerbade first. Noah nodded absent-mindedly. His eyes were still staring at the place where the 3 fine steel adventurers from Blue Rose had left. His eyes narrowed slightly. There were only 2 steel tier squads in the kingdom. Even if the members of such an illustrious team were not as good as Gudjefu, they were not far behind, right? Of course, this was not the reason why Noah paid attention to the 3 adventurers from Wild Rose mercenary group. Noah was paying attention to the petite girl who had wrapped herself tightly in a black robe. Noah felt a strange aura from the girl. That aura was very strange. Noah had also sensed the same aura from Zaisha. However, that girl's aura was not as strong and valiant as Satya's. Vampire? Noah raised the corners of his mouth. Interesting. About 30 minutes later, Noah and Annabelle arrived at the city gate. There, a carriage had already been parked. Next to it, the 3 steel tier girls seemed to have been waiting there from the beginning. They seemed to be talking about something. When they noticed Noah's arrival, they turned their gazes to Noah one after another. Too slow, boy. Gagrain showed a ferocious beast-like smile to Noah. You actually dare to make me wait for you. You've got guts. Gagrain's rude words made some anger appear in Annabelle's eyes, and her gaze towards Gagrain was full of hostility. If Noah hadn't warned Annabelle in advance, she might have already launched an attack. And Gagrain obviously noticed Annabelle's hostile gaze. He raised his brows and looked at Noah. Is that your follower? She seems to be very capable. Gagrain wasn't mocking, but telling the truth. In the kingdom, Gagrain was also very famous. As the highest level of steel tier adventurer, Gagrain was definitely qualified to be called a hero. Facing a person who could be called a hero, to be able to display such blatant hostility in front of Gragland, that wasn't something that could be done casually. To put it bluntly, even Secret Silver and Orichalcum adventurers dared not confront Gagrain like this. Therefore, Gagrain didn't hate Annabelle. On the contrary, he admired her very much. It was just that he didn't know why such a beautiful and capable girl would be so obedient to a man. In this regard, Noah just smiled indifferently. Sort of. Is that so? Gagrain curled his lips. Well, it has nothing to do with me anyway. After saying such a sentence, Gagrain got into the carriage. His huge body caused the entire carriage to sink a little. It must be quite difficult for the horse to pull such a person, right? Then, Tina also got into the carriage. The remaining petite girl in a black cloak seemed to have glanced at Noah and Annabelle through the strange mask. After pausing on Noah for a while, she also got into the carriage. What a rude bunch of insects. Annabelle's voice became low and deep. How dare they get into the carriage before Sir Noah? Sir Noah, can you allow me to pull out their tongues and stuff them into their nostrils? No. Noah sighed. I forgot that the reason why I didn't go to the royal city last time was because I was worried that you guys would cause unnecessary trouble because of your hateful personalities. After saying that, Noah went forward with Annabelle as if he had a headache and also got into the carriage. Following the sound of a whip, the two horses in front let out a long neigh. Then, the carriage moved forward on the road. In the carriage, Ghislaine, Tina, and the group of cloaked girls sat in a row. Noah and Annabelle sat opposite the three of them. Because they were only in a business relationship, both sides didn't talk and an indescribable silence enveloped the entire carriage. In this regard, no one present cared and didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the atmosphere. Needless to say, Tina and the group of cloaked girls weren't the kind of people who couldn't stand loneliness and silence from their voices and dressing. Annabelle didn't even have the slightest intention to talk to humans. Noah only supported his chin with one arm and looked out of the window. It seemed like he was just looking at the scenery, but in fact, he was silently memorizing the path. Noah didn't have a map of this world. Being able to reach Elantir was entirely due to the guidance of the residents of Khan Village. The villagers of Khan Village did provide Noah with a map, but the map wasn't very detailed. Therefore, Noah compared the map in his mind and after confirming that this road was indeed leading to the royal city, he turned his gaze back. And when he turned back, Noah noticed it. The cloaked girl seemed to be looking at Noah. Although the strange mask on her face didn't reveal her expression, Noah could still feel her gaze through the thin slits of her eyes. The others seemed to have noticed the cloaked girl's strange behavior and turned around one after another. What's wrong? Urbi Rue? Ghislaine spoke without mincing his words. Have you taken a fancy to this man? Want to sleep with him for a night? This sentence directly caused the atmosphere in the carriage to become extremely strange. Annabelle clicked her tongue and looked at Ghislaine and the others with a gaze that couldn't be described as unfriendly. She was really considering where to start. Tina didn't find it strange and directly closed her eyes and turned her head away. As for the cloaked girl called Urbi Rue, her entire delicate body trembled slightly. Then, she turned her head and looked at Ghislaine. Brainless muscle girl, have you thought of men to this extent? I'm worried for you, Ghislaine said nonchalantly. After all, you didn't seem to be interested in men before. Being interested doesn't mean that I'm thinking of men. Urbi Rue was speechless. So, you'd better shut up. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly smiled. I don't mind. Chapter 1183. It doesn't matter to me. Noah's sudden words made everyone's expression slightly stiff. They were completely frozen at once. Including Gerland. Clearly, Ghislaine was just joking with Ebru with those words. After all, from Ebru's body shape, she was only equivalent to an 11 or 12-year-old girl. Under such circumstances, no matter what, Gerland wouldn't really think that seriously. And even Gerland was like this, not to mention Ebru as the person involved. Although no one could see Ebru's expression at this moment because of the mask. But the astonishment hidden under the mask was still vaguely noticed by everyone present. It was easy to imagine how much Noah's sudden words had shaken Abilui. As for Annabelle, this combat maid's frosty face had long collapsed. She looked at Noah with the most astonished gaze she had ever seen before, stuttering as she spoke. How? How can such a lowly creature? Before Annabelle could finish her sentence, Noah raised a hand and stopped her. Ignoring Gerland and Tina's astonishment, Noah looked straight at Ebru, smiled indifferently, and said such a sentence. Can't help it. Who asked me to be interested in you? Logically speaking, with the previous words as a foreshadowing, this sentence should sound full of a pink atmosphere. However, Noah's calm expression and half-smile eyes told everyone present that in his heart, he didn't really think in that direction. In that case, the meaning of Noah's words was quite worthy of further investigation. The way Gerland and Tina looked at Noah had completely changed. Ebra felt as if she was completely seen through under the gaze of that pair of dark and deep eyes, and a chill burst out of her heart. It was only at this moment that the three fine steel adventurers realized. Perhaps, this man Noah was very likely to be more complicated than Annabelle. Giglan stared at Noah, his muscles tensing up. Who would have thought that there would be a time when I make a mistake? Elua is still the best, don't praise me, I didn't notice it either. Ibilua sneered. It's just that my intuition tells me that this man is not simple. In contrast, Tina didn't say anything. Instead, she silently placed a hand behind her back before reaching into her waist. There must be a weapon there, right? Seeing that Ibru, Jaren, and Tina were all on guard, Annabelle, who had calmed down, glared coldly at the three adventurers, causing the atmosphere in the carriage to become extremely sinister. However, this was something that could not be helped. From an adventurer's point of view, it was impossible not to be on guard against a seemingly harmless man who could hide from the eyes of a fine steel adventurer when he suddenly became a person who could pose a threat to them. I should have thought of that long ago. How can a person who can have a capable attendant be an ordinary person? Giglan smacked his lips, and asked directly. Are you really only intending to make a deal with us? You don't have any other intentions, right? It's time for you to shut that stinky mouth of yours, woman. Annabelle finally couldn't hold back and glared coldly at Gigland. Mosquitoes like you aren't worthy of Master Noah's swatting hand. You should know how much weight you have. Are your eyes made of muscles too? Do you want me to help you train while I'm at it? Oh. Gigland narrowed his eyes, cracked his mouth, and laughed. It's been a long time since someone has spoken to me with such a tone. Not bad, I'm also very curious about how much weight you have. After saying that, Gigland leaned forward, as if intending to press his head against Annabelle's forehead, and laughed sinisterly. Get out of here. I'll train with you. Looking at Gigland's coarse face that was inches away from her, Annabelle frowned slightly as if some kind of insect had crawled up to her face. Finally, a look of disgust appeared in her eyes. And the emotion hidden deep under this disgust was a complete murderous intent. Annabelle had long been displeased with this group of inferior human creatures. If they were just crawling in front of her like ordinary insects, it wasn't impossible for her to pretend that she didn't see them. But this group of people had repeatedly disregarded the master that Annabelle respected the most in her heart. How could Annabelle not be angry? For Annabelle, if she didn't treat Noah like a servant, it would be disrespectful. And as long as it was someone who was disrespectful to Noah, they should be obliterated. With this thought in mind, Annabelle's hand slowly reached for the long sword at her waist. At this moment, Noah suddenly spoke. As a fine steel adventurer, you should also be in existence that the world calls a hero, right? Noah spoke without the slightest hint of nervousness, causing the tense atmosphere in the entire space to stagnate. Ignoring everyone's reaction, Noah's gaze swept across Ibilui, Tina, and Gigland in succession. Finally, he looked at Gigland. As far as I know, the kingdom's warrior Gejef Stolanov is also a character who has stepped into the realm of heroes. Compared to him, who is stronger? I thought you wanted to ask something. Gigland stared at Noah for a while, then pursed his lips and said disinterestedly. Listen carefully, kid. The so-called heroes refer to those who have surpassed the realm of humans and reached the limits of humans. They are monsters who have extraordinary talent. Although fine steel adventurers can also be considered heroes, they are still human. Gigland shot a glance at Ibirui and waved his hand in a seemingly nonchalant manner. So, I'm still an ordinary person who can't step into the realm of heroes. In other words, Gigland admitted that he couldn't compare to Gejef. However, that was also an answer that Noah expected. In terms of level, Gejef was equivalent to a level 35 warrior. As for fine steel adventurers, they could forget about level 29 and above. The difference between level 29 and level 35 didn't seem that big, but if they really fought, the winner would still be the latter in the end. That was the difference. What's wrong? Geegland looked at Noah strangely. Are you trying to say that if I can't reach Uncle Gedjeff's realm, then I can't defeat you? Annabelle snorted coldly. If I can't reach Gedjeff's realm, then I can't defeat Noah? Even if there were 10 more Gedjeffs, they wouldn't even be worthy of carrying the shoes of the supreme ruler of Nazarik's underground tomb. Although Annabelle didn't directly say these thoughts, her actions expressed everything, causing Geegland to glare fiercely at Annabelle. However, at this time, Noah seemed to understand what kind of people the 3 fine steel adventurers in front of him were, and nodded. Understood. Thank you for your answer. After saying this, Noah continued to look out the window as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Annabelle had no choice but to close her eyes and remain silent. Eberui, Tina, and Geegland all glanced at one another in bewilderment. That's it? What's wrong, kid? Kid? Geegland asked in confusion. Aren't you going to fight me? This made Noah feel strange. Who said I'm going to fight you? You're not going to fight me? Geegland raised his eyebrows. Then what are you here for? I'd like to ask, why do you think I want to fight you? Noah asked calmly. I'm here to do business, not to fight. If you're itching for a fight, and my follower seems to want to try, I'll let her accompany you. Noah looked at Geegland and suddenly smiled. However, like I said, I'm here to do business. If you want to use my follower to practice, then 100 gold coins per minute, no bargaining. The corner of Geegland's mouth twitched. Not to mention Geegland, even Eberui and Tina were dumbfounded. Only Annabelle looked eager to try. If she could help Noah achieve his goal of making money, and also teach this annoying woman a lesson, it would be the best for Annabelle. And in this strange atmosphere, the carriage continued to move in the direction of the royal city without stopping. Chapter 1184. If one had to use a word to describe the kingdom's royal capital, then there was only one word that could fully express it. That was ancient. To put it nicely, this word meant that it had a long history. To put it bluntly, this word could also be used to describe the royal capital's antiquity. At least, that was how Noah felt. Unlike the brand new buildings in Ylantir, most of the buildings in the royal capital were very old and rustic, without any novelty or novelty. On the ground, many of the roads had not been paved. On the streets, the pedestrians coming and going did not express the liveliness that a kingdom's royal capital should have. Here, it was as if everyone was on guard against something, as if they were afraid of something. Even if they were talking to each other, they did not dare to speak too loudly, causing the entire space to present a lifeless and heavy atmosphere. It was very depressing. If it were not for the guards patrolling the surroundings with spears in their hands, and the castle in the deepest part of the royal capital that could be seen even from afar, it was believed that no one would think that such a lifeless city was the kingdom's royal capital. In fact, Noah indeed had such doubts. Is this really the royal capital? Noah frowned slightly. It doesn't look like it at all. Have you never been to the royal capital? Geegland glanced at Noah. The expression on his face was not as carefree as before, but faintly revealed a kind of displeasure. This is also something that can't be helped. Although the royal capital's security is not bad compared to the other cities, this kingdom is not a place where people can live peacefully for the rest of their lives. It is already considered good that a large number of demons did not directly attack the city. Noah and Annabelle instantly looked at each other. At this point, it was necessary to mention the situation of the kingdom of Restige. Among the 3 kingdoms, the empire and the theocracy, the kingdom was undoubtedly the weakest. There was no other reason other than that this kingdom had hidden dangers that could not be ignored. Nobles. Simply put, in the kingdom, basically, all the nobles belonged to the kind of families that were rotten to the core. In the kingdom, the royal family owned 30% of the country's land, the nobles owned 40%, and the rest was privately owned. It was a feudal country. However, in such a feudal country, the royal family was always under the control of the aristocrats. For example, all the nobles in the kingdom were currently divided into two factions, the royal faction and the aristocratic faction. The royal faction naturally supported the current king and served the current king. The aristocratic party, on the other hand, was secretly opposing the royal party. After the current king abdicated, they intended to support the prince under their control to take over the throne and thus control the entire political power of the country. In addition, the empire had always been eyeing the kingdom covetously. With the constant war between the empire and the kingdom naturally became the weakest country. In other words, this country was gradually becoming corrupt due to the greed of a group of foolish nobles for political power and benefits. Who knows if we'll suddenly provoke those foolish nobles while we're walking on the road? Even if we bump into them, I reckon we'll either be beaten to death or have all of our wealth squeezed out of us, Gigland said in displeasure. This is how chaotic this country is. You should be content if you don't meet those nobles who have no choice but to resort to robbery in order to survive. After saying that, Gigland walked in a certain direction with a sullen look on his face. Clearly, Gigland's sullen attitude was not directed at Noah, but at those nobles. Although Ibilua and Tina didn't say anything, they didn't find Gigland's displeasure to be inappropriate in the slightest. They followed behind Gigland and walked forward. Our team leader should be waiting for us right now. Tina also left this sentence behind. That's why you should come with us. Noah shrugged nonchalantly. He brought along Annabelle, who was indifferent to everything around her, and followed behind the three fine steel adventurers as they walked forward together. Along the way, many people cast their gazes at Noah and the others, and whispered discussions broke out. It was difficult for three fine steel adventurers of the highest level to not attract attention when walking on the streets. Not to mention, these three adventurers of the fine steel rank all had their own unique appearances. In comparison, Annabelle, who was wearing a plain robe, not only looked very normal, but also had a stunning appearance, which made many people exclaim in surprise. In that case, as the only male in such a group, it was imaginable how much attention Noah would attract. Unfortunately, in the group, apart from Annabelle, the others were all used to this kind of situation. The only exception was Annabelle, who looked down on creatures like humans. She didn't care about the gazes of humans at all. Therefore, the group didn't react to this situation and continued to walk forward. Soon, a luxurious hotel that looked like a high-class restaurant with a spacious courtyard and stable enough to practice swordsmanship entered the group's eyes. That was a hotel specially provided for adventurers. No matter which country it was, as long as it was a city with an adventurers guild and adventurers, there would basically be such a hotel. And this hotel in front of them was the most high-class adventurers hotel in the royal capital. Only adventurers who were extremely confident in their abilities and could afford the high cost of accommodation would choose to come here. Gragland, Ibru, and Tina pushed open the door of the hotel and walked in. Noah and Annabelle, who followed behind the three, immediately saw the scene inside. It was a place that looked like a high-class bar or restaurant. The decor was rather high-end and the space was extremely spacious. However, there were very few guests inside, which showed how rare high-grade adventurers were. The door of such a hotel naturally wouldn't be opened often. And once it was opened, it meant the arrival of more or less famous adventurers. At this moment, curious gazes swarmed into the shop. When they saw the three adventurers at the fine steel level, they immediately lowered their voices subconsciously. Gragland, who didn't care about this situation at all, looked around. After a while, his gaze stopped at one of the corners of the shop, and he spat out a voice that was much louder than the surroundings. Leader and Tia are there. As soon as Gragland's voice fell, Noah's gaze also shifted in that direction. Then, Noah saw it. In the innermost corner of the shop, there were two people sitting around a round table. One of them was exactly the same as Tina, whether it was her hairstyle, figure, appearance, or temperament. It didn't take a genius to figure out that this was the Tia that Gerland was referring to, and they seemed to be twins. The other one was a young girl. She had green eyes, pink lips, and a different kind of charm. She was about 17 or 18 years old, with a head of beautiful blonde hair and a relatively unique face. Agnes Elba Drew Eidolon. She was a noble of the kingdom and the leader of one of the only two fine steel adventurers in the kingdom. When she heard Gragland's voice, she had already cast her gaze over. After sweeping a glance at Noah and the others, she immediately fixed her gaze on Noah and Annabelle. Leader. Gragland walked over casually as if he didn't see anything and sat down. We're back. We're back. Ibilua and Tina also greeted one another before sitting down as well. Welcome back. The young girl named Tia raised her hand. Welcome back. Agnes also said the same, but her gaze was still fixed on Noah and Annabelle. These two are the people we met in Elantir. Gragland pointed at Tina. Tina wants to buy a dagger from them. That's right, Tina replied in a concise manner. But I don't have that much money on me. A hint of realization appeared on Hagrid's face upon hearing this, and a curious look appeared on T's face. What dagger? Tina didn't say anything. Instead, she took out the poison dagger and placed it on the table. Chapter 1185. When the emerald green dagger with a frightening silver glow appeared in front of the fine steel adventurers, even Hagrid's eyes lit up. Since even Haggis was acting like this, Tia, who was also an assassin like Tina, reached out her hand and picked up the poison dagger from the table. She looked at it carefully and spun it around a few times in an extremely nimble manner. Then, she made a sound. This is good stuff. Logically speaking, a fine steel adventurer's equipment could only be of a high level. Therefore, the adventurers belonging to the fine steel level team called Blue Rose had already seen a lot of good quality equipment. They even had excellent equipment themselves. If even a fine steel adventurer said that the poison dagger was a good item, then the value of this dagger could only be imagined. Of course, to Noah, this was just an heritage-grade dagger, which was equivalent to an E-grade weapon. But to the people of this world, an heritage-grade weapon was equivalent to an E-grade weapon. It could already be considered as the best. I want it too. Tina could not help but look at Noah. Do you have another dagger like this? Hearing this, Noah smiled slightly and quietly reached one hand behind his back. In a corner where no one could see, Noah's hand behind his back slightly fluctuated with an obscure magical wave. Along with the obscure magical wave, a ray of light flashed in Noah's palm. The next moment, the light turned into a dagger. A dagger that was emerald green in color. Other than the poison dagger, what else could it be? Noah put the freshly made dagger on the table and said heartily. Coincidentally, I have another one. This sentence was obviously a lie. As long as Noah was willing, then he could make countless poison daggers. This was because Noah had a spell called Weapon Refinement. Weapon Refinement, steelmaking magic, duplicate, refine, and forge weapons, replicated, refined, and forged weapons will be weakened to a certain extent depending on the level, performance, and ability of the weapon. Replicating, refining, and forging weapons will depend on the weapon's level, performance, and ability to maintain the weapon for a certain period of time. This spell was called Weapon Refinement. It could create any weapon that Noah needed. As long as it belongs to the category of weapon, Noah can create it out of thin air. The weapons produced would be weakened to a certain extent and exist for a certain period of time according to the weapon's level, performance, and ability. In other words, as long as the weapon's level, performance, and ability were not high, the weapons created by Noah would not be weakened, and their existence would be cancelled. Coincidentally, the legacy weapon called the poison dagger was only equivalent to a grade E relic, and its ability was only enhanced with a poison spell. For a weapon of this level, Noah could casually create it with the magic of weapon refinement, and it would neither weaken nor disappear. Unaware of this, Tia happily picked up the other poison dagger and said without giving him an explanation. Then I'll buy this one. Good lad. Gerland looked at Noah in surprise. You actually have a hidden weapon? Don't tell me you have something else? Noah did not answer Gerland's question. Instead, he spread his hands and looked at Tia. Miss Tina spent 1,000 gold coins to buy this poison dagger. Oh. Tia was startled. After hesitating for a moment, she said. In other words, we have to pay you 2,000 gold coins? That's right. Noah's lips curled up. How about it? Can the two of you afford it? Tina and Tia looked at each other and immediately looked at Hagrid. Although 2,000 gold coins seemed like a small amount, it was actually quite a large sum. For example, the taxes that the nobles in the kingdom collected from all the citizens in their territories, apart from the nobles who were quite powerful, would be around this amount in a month. In fact, some of the weaker nobles with smaller territories would not even be able to collect this amount in a month. As members of one of the only two fine steel adventurers in the kingdom, Tina and Tia had the means to come up with this sum of money. However, such a large sum of money was definitely not something they could carry around with them. Apart from being a fine steel adventurer, Hagrid was also a noble of the kingdom. Hagrid shook her head helplessly when she felt Tina and Tia's gazes. Then, she smiled sweetly. That's fine too. With these 2 daggers, Tina and Tia's strength will increase again. I'll pay for this for the time being. After saying that, Agagi untied a leather pouch from her waist, opened the pouch, and took out a gold coin from it. No. That was not a gold coin. This was because it was not a dazzling gold. Instead, it was similar to silver. It shone with a dazzling light, and its color was even more dazzling than normal silver. This was a platinum coin. It was 10 times more valuable than a gold coin. A platinum coin was equivalent to 10 gold coins in the general currency. Hagrid took out 200 platinum coins and put them in another leather pouch before handing it to Noah. 200 platinum coins is equivalent to 2,000 gold coins, right? Platinum coins? Noah thought for a while and nodded. That's right. I'll take it then. Although he did not know if the platinum coins could be used to pay for the maintenance of the underground tomb in Nasarick, if they could be used, they might be worth more than gold coins. Even if they could not be used, they could still be exchanged for gold coins elsewhere. Therefore, for Noah, it was not a bad idea. Thus, Noah reached out and grabbed the leather pouch that Hagrid handed to him. However, when Noah wanted to take the leather pouch, he realized that Hagrid was not looking at him. Hagrid did not let go of the leather pouch. A pair of green eyes stared straight at Noah, and Hagrid asked with a smile. By the way, I haven't asked your name yet. Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Hagrid's smiling face. After a while, he spoke indifferently. Just call me Noah. Hearing these words, Annabelle raised her eyebrows and opened her mouth slightly. She seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she suppressed it. However, even so, there was still a trace of resentment in Annabelle's eyes. That was Annabelle's displeasure at the fact that humans, as inferior creatures, called the supreme ruler of the underground tomb in Nasarick by his name. What Annabelle didn't know was that, in fact, Haggis had been observing this good-looking girl who was silently following behind Noah. Therefore, the fleeting resentment in Annabelle's eyes made Hagrid's eyes flicker slightly. However, Hagrid did not notice it either. In front of her, Noah also clearly saw the undulating waves in the pair of green eyes. At that moment, Noah's eyes had a little thought-provoking look, and he said such a sentence. Then, can you please let go of your hand? Oh, I'm really sorry. Hagrid let go of the leather pouch without the slightest apology and chuckled at Noah. Mr. Noah's companion is really beautiful. I have only seen one person with beauty comparable to your companion in my life, so I'm a little curious about your origin. At this moment, except for Hagrid, Abirua, Gorgland, Tina, and Tia all exchanged a look and understood everything in an instant. This was the tacit understanding that could only be cultivated by going through life and death together all year round. It was this tacit understanding that made Hagrid notice something from the performance of Abirua and others, and she began to pay attention to Noah and Annabelle. And the more she looked, the more Hagrid couldn't see through Noah and Annabelle. In this way, if Hagrid still didn't understand that Noah and Annabelle were not simple, then the title of Fine Steel Adventure could really be thrown away. In this regard, Noah just put away the leather pouch full of platinum coins into his arms, and then smiled at Hagrid. On the way here, I also talked to your teammates, Mississippi. Noah glanced at Ibirua and said with a faint smile. I'm also very curious about the origin of one of your teammates. The group of Fine Steel adventurers suddenly narrowed their eyes. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.